Hello, welcome. Welcome, welcome. Let's see who all is here. This is the live stream for December 7th, 2016, and my name is Dana. And if you're new here, welcome. And if you're not new here, welcome. And if you are new to these live streams, we go for about, I don't know, 2 to 3 hours. It just kind of depends on how many people are here and what questions people have and uh, where the conversation goes. So feel free to ask any question you would like in the chat, um, and I will do my best to answer it. People in the chat also answer, so it's nice because you kind of get a wide range of input from a wide range of people. So, okay, lots of people are here tonight. We have Martine, Peace Pom Pom, hello. Diana, Nightingale, Misty, Kevin says, what up? Ryan, hi Ryan. Amanda, Rose, Dad, surviving divorce, says hello, hello. Amanda with a great question right out of the gate. And she asks, do narcissists have complex PTSD also? I think it's a great question. And I think the answer is it depends on who you ask. According to the book, Complex PTSD From Surviving to Thriving by Pete Walker, which I think is a fantastic book, yeah, they would be considered that. So basically any type of, well, I guess it depends. It depends on why they are the way they are. But if they grew up in a home environment that, there was a lot of trauma and abuse and neglect and any of those things, if that was their reaction to their environment, was to develop this personality disorder, then yes. So any type of his whole and I don't know if it's like an original idea to Pete or if he just wrote a book on it, but because it's also covered in the book Healing the Child Within by Charles Whitfield. But just kind of the concept that we all are products of our environment, but because people interpret things differently, there's kind of that wild card, which is just our own genetic makeup, right? That we all perceive to this, we all react to the same environment differently. So you could have, for example, like you could have two children that grow up in a home where there's a lot of abuse, and one child grows up to become abusive, and the other child grows up and decides to become not abusive. And if you were to ask either child why, they would tell you pretty much the same answer. They would say, well, you know what? I grew up in a house where there was a lot of abuse, and that's why. That's why I am the way I am. Because I saw it growing up, and I just never knew any different. You could ask the other child, and they might say, I don't hit or yell or belittle or demean because I grew up in an environment where I saw that happening and I vowed to myself I would never be that way. So it's interesting how people turn out the way that they turn out. But this is not to say that, we should necessarily, like you could pity a person for how they act, or have compassion or caring or what have you, as long as it's not putting yourself in harm's way. And I think that's an important thing for us to realize, that we can't save anybody else other than ourselves. Especially we can't save a person that doesn't want saving, for sure. And even if they did want saving, we still can't save them. Like, they need to do that on their own. This is a personal journey for all of us. So I hope that kind of answers your question. Peace Pom Pom asks about Doug. Yeah, he's got some stuff in his own life going on. He'd said, it was a few weeks ago, that he was going to take a little break from the live streams and kind of just recoup. But yeah, I hear you. I miss him too. David is here. Sunflower is here. Is that Florida? FL Girl Next Door. Kevin is here. So let's see here. Oh boy. Helene is here and says, Dana, I'm so thankful for you. Well, thank you. I just finally got discarded 2 days ago after me trying to leave for the past 6 months. He finally left me yesterday. Oh, wow. So this is very fresh. I'm sorry that you're going through this. And, I think sometimes it's, like you were saying, you've been trying to leave for the past 6 months and he finally discarded you. And sometimes that can be the best thing that happens because it's not in our court. It's not in our control. Like they up and leave and it's like, it pushes us out of the nest in a way that we might not have ever left otherwise. It doesn't make it any easier, I know that, and I'm sure that you're still in a tremendous amount of pain. If you haven't already, made your way into a support group, you might want to. They really can be incredibly helpful to just vent and to get support and to really get that validation and clarity as to what you're going through, because it is an awful lot to try to process by yourself. Austin says, how do you keep narcissists out of your head? And that's a big question. I guess I'm not quite sure what you mean by that. Like, do you mean from like manipulating you, or do you mean from how do you keep them out of your head as far as like how do you quit thinking about them? In terms of manipulating you, well, I guess I would say if you know that a person's manipulating you, it's really helpful at any given time, right, with anybody, to see the situation as clearly as possible. So if a person has a history of being deceitful, of lying, of manipulating, of doing these kinds of things, you would be wise to expect that from them in the future. So if you realize, okay, this person has this kind of behavior, they normally provoke me, they normally gaslight, they normally call names, they normally do whatever they normally do. So to expect that, so that in that way, if it happens again, you're not so caught off guard. Because it's like, yes, of course this person was provoking me. They normally provoke. Like that's what they do. And so once you can like accept their behavior, I'm not saying that you have to be okay with it. Don't get me wrong. But just accepting it for what it is, being like, this is this, and I know it's so cliche, but like, this is what it is. Like this, I'm seeing it clearly. I'm not trying to justify it or minimize it or deny it or hope that it'll be different. Like this is what it is in this very moment. So once you start accepting things for what they are, then you can start adjusting your own behavior and then adapting and then acting accordingly. And that's when we start regaining our own power and control over the situation, because we're seeing things clearly and then can start adjusting our behavior. As far as how do you, if the question was how do you quit, just thinking about them in general, a lot of people, myself included, when these types of relationships end, they can just be so all-consuming on so many different levels. Especially if you've made the person your whole life, if you get out of it and you start realizing that there has been a lot of like psychological and emotional abuse, and you start seeing things clearly, and there's just a lot of questions, a lot of unanswered questions, and there's not a lot of closure that tends to come along with these types of relationships, which is incredibly hard. And oftentimes because a person is being blamed for how they've been treated, they've been blamed for the abuse, that they feel that this is all their fault. And so it messes with the person's mind on so many different levels. When So because these relationships can be so all-consuming, there's oftentimes a big void that's left behind when this person leaves. There's a void of any kind when there's a massive change of any kind, right? So even if the relationship was fantastic, if the person leaves, there's still going to be a huge void. There's still that period of intense loss, of feeling very, scattered and fragmented, of how do I pick up the pieces and go on? My life is so radically different. And that takes a person a little while to kind of reassemble the pieces of their life and to make sense of this bomb that went off in their life. One thing that really helps with that is realizing, okay, there is a big void in my life right now that this person has left. And even if they were an abusive, hurtful person, there's still going to be that void there. And so if you can, what I think tends to help is to focus on filling that void with things that are positive, things that encourage and empower and enhance your life as much as possible. Because when you start filling up that hole with good things, then that's going to become like your new level of normal, is all of this goodness in your life, really. And it's going to kind of crowd out the bad. It's going to crowd out the negativity and the toxicity that was their relationship. And especially if you're finding yourself meeting new people, I never encourage people to date. I would say at a minimum of like 6 months, ideally a year after one of these relationships are over. It just takes time. It takes time to just gather yourself and to get back in alignment with who you are, and learning to trust your judgment again, learning to trust your perceptions of people and of situations and all of this. But during that healing time, and for some people it's less, and for some people it's a lot more, and that's okay. This is not a race. This is all about us focusing on us. And so when you're healing, to focus on, filling your life up with goodness, it will help to crowd out the bad. And once you get used to having things that, and people especially, that enhance your life, your tolerance for anything that makes you feel less than good becomes paper thin. And when you start experiencing anybody that you just don't feel good around, you're going to bounce. Like, you're just not going to want to stick around for that for very long, because you realize, I don't need this. Like, I don't need this in my life. I've got all these other, these other people, like these friendships, and even if they're not like super deep friendships, even if they're just people that you've recently met, that you're just getting out and doing things with, it's just this realization of, there are other people out there in the world that are kind and good, that I get along with, that I enjoy being around. And there's a lot of peace and reassurance that can come from that. I hope that helps. Nightingale says, I feel guilty for abandoning a narcissist because he has a mental illness. What should I do? I am under no contact. Please help. So with guilt, I like to think of guilt in two different ways. I think it's important to designate the difference. So there's appropriate guilt, and then there's inappropriate guilt. Appropriate guilt is when we have done something wrong, right? Let's say I stole your car. If I have some sort of moral compass, I should feel guilty about that, right? I would. Like, I would feel very guilty for stealing your car. That's why I would never steal your car. But if a person does something wrong, it's appropriate that they feel guilty for doing it. That's appropriate guilt. Inappropriate guilt is something that people experience, especially those of us that are more on because you could call it like the codependent side of the spectrum, but I know that word has a lot of it's very emotionally charged for people. Let's call it the other people that are more givers. Okay, if we're used to giving and giving, if we're used to our lives being about other people, then we oftentimes have a ton of inappropriate guilt. We have a terrible time saying no. We have a terrible time having boundaries. We really struggle with doing what's in our own best interest, because for so long it's always been about other people. And this is one of the many challenges people have with going no contact, is they feel terrible. They're like, obviously this person is a really sick individual. Like, they are just, it's sad. It's sad. And they're just very deranged, and it's tragic. But at the end of the day, you know, we can't help them. They can only help them. And it's sort of like, you see this person who's drowning, but the drowning person doesn't want help. Us jumping into that raging river, potentially drowning ourselves to save another drowning person who doesn't want help, is just going to create two victims instead of one. Like, it's so hard to take some steps back and just realize we don't have power over this. If this person is hell-bent on sinking, that's all. We can't control that. And our love can't save them. It's those buckets, right? Those buckets of, and I talk about these a lot, like the empty buckets that we all carry around, right? Well, ideally they're not empty, but the 3 buckets that we all carry around. We have a bucket of physical needs, a bucket of emotional needs, and a bucket of stability. These buckets need to be met by us. So if we don't know how to fill our own buckets, then these buckets are going to be like perpetually empty. Because if we're always looking outside of ourselves for validation, for verification, for getting these buckets filled, then they're always going to most likely run really low. So it's kind of the same thing with, if you've got a narcissistic person who's very insecure, who needs that constant validation. It's just all about them. They take and they take and they take and they take. It's never enough. It's absolutely just exhausting and draining, because it's just all about them. Not to mention all of the destruction that their selfishness causes. You can't stay in that. None of us can stay in that. And it's not healthy for us to be in a situation where around people that are bad for our mental health. Like, we have to get to the place where we value ourselves enough to be like, you know what? I need to do what I need to do in order to stay safe and sane. And it does not matter what anybody else thinks about that. I've got to do, because if I sink, then then it's game over. So you've really got to value your safety and your sanity. So knowing that, okay, so let me back up to the different types of guilt, right? So the inappropriate guilt, which is something I was saying that we all struggle with. Knowing that we all struggle with this, identifying it, being, okay, this is inappropriate guilt. I'm feeling bad for wanting to protect myself. I'm feeling bad for drawing a boundary. Once you can identify that this is not healthy, then you can start working towards changing that. There's some groups out there, Al-Anon, CODA. These are both free groups. They have groups in pretty much every city, probably around the world, that can help people with boundaries and dealing with destructive people. So, but I get it. I know it's hard, but it's worth it. And that's one of the big lessons, I think, in all of this, is learning about healthy boundaries and what we need to do to keep ourselves safe and sane. Okay, let's see. Let me scroll down here. Picky says, what happens if you leave a narcissist first before they discard? Generally, they don't like it because then the game is ending on your terms and not theirs. And, we all were targeted for some sort of reason. Generally, it's called supply, right? So we were targeted as some source of supply, whether it's money, sex, housing, transportation, social status, public image, just to feed their ego. There's a wide variety of reasons a person's targeted. And if the supply, gets out of the web before the narcissist is able to fully feed on them, then they just get enraged because that's not the game. Like the game was, no, you get caught in my web, I just suck you dry, and then I discard you when I'm ready to discard you. So knowing that the game has been turned, I would expect hoovering. I would expect a lot of like future faking and false promises and a bunch of lies and a bunch of, love bombing. Potentially them throwing out everything under the sun to try to get their supply back in line. That's just what they do. So knowing that this is a possibility, and of course, everybody's different. So who's to say what they might do? They might just identify another source of supply and drive on, and it won't even be an issue. But if they are amping up and you're getting, lots of text messages and emails and they're not leaving you alone, then I would just prepare myself for worst case scenario and then work your way backwards. So prepare for it. So if it happens, you're not caught off guard. You're especially not caught off guard emotionally. And in that way you don't get sucked back in. I hope that helps. Phil asks, hold on a second here. The chat's going fast. Okay. Okay, Robin, this kind of goes back to that other question. Robin says, why after a discard is he a few days later being nice, but still, I used to love you? Because it's a game and it's all meant to mess with your head, and it just shows the level of, this is not a healthy person. Like at a minimum, they are incredibly immature. At a minimum. And you can't have a mature relationship with an immature person. Like that just doesn't work. So like right there, that shows you like this person's all over the place. Like they want you, they don't want you, they love you, but they used to love you. No. Like no. That's games. And to me, that right there is enough to just bow out, because who needs that? Like that's an emotional roller coaster. But that's oftentimes what they do. So if there was a sudden discard, I think a lot of narcissists will do this. It's a weird thing that they do, and it oftentimes is done so they can cheat. So it's this whole like, okay, well, I want a divorce, and then like they move out, or it's sort of like saying, okay, I'm on base. Like, okay, I said I wanted a divorce, so like I went out and cheated, or I said that we broke up, I went out and cheated, and slept with somebody else, but now I'm back. Or now I'm calling, and now I'm hoovering. But, well, I didn't really cheat on you because I said that I wanted a divorce. So like that somehow gives them a free pass. I see that a lot, and I've experienced that before too. So it's just manipulation, lies, games, deceit, by any name you want to call it, is problematic. And it's not worth your energy, your time, any of it. I wouldn't spend a whole lot of time trying to second guess their motives for things, because that will take you down like a whole path of madness, trying to figure out what, when you've got a person that's impulsive and they flit from thing to thing to thing, and there's no depth to their wants and needs, it's just they live moment to moment, trying to figure out like why they're doing that's an exercise in frustration and crazy making for you. I would encourage you to reinvest that energy into yourself, and ideally like moving forward and realizing you don't need that. Like there's no a relationship should be about open, honest, sincere, mature communication and not games. Ride asks, oh, I'm sorry, I was going to answer Phil's question first. Phil says, Dana, under what tactic is lying about the person to steal a child from them? That's a good question. What tactic would that be? I guess smear campaign. Lying. It's compulsive. It's oftentimes compulsive lying. If they are, what oftentimes happens is a person who kind of has that narcissistic, it's just this weird backwards wiring they have. I don't even know how else to describe it. If they're accusing you of things that they're doing, like if they start accusing you of strange things, like, oh, but like you know that they did it, right? They're like, okay, well, no, he hit the kids. But you're like, no, actually, like you hit the kids. Or that, you know, that you were abusive, but they were abusive. Or you were manipulative, but they were really manipulative. These kinds of things. You know, that's called projection. And you know, that could be kind of maybe part of what's going on, but a lot of it's smear campaign. And if things don't end on their terms, then they do. They come up with this very altered reality and present themselves as, you know, as the victim. And it's like, when people say that there's two sides to the story, there's some truth to that. However, not so much with a narcissist, because there's what happened and then there's their version of what happened, which has no basis in reality whatsoever. It's a very delusional version of events. So let me just go off on a little tangent here. That's my frustration when I see people that get into couples counseling. When you're dealing with a narcissistic partner, okay, who's got this pattern of behavior of like entitled behavior, where they feel when you're not looking, they're lying, they're cheating, they're deceiving, they're just causing wreckage right and left. And, you know, and maybe they are abusive to your face. They don't even need to be. If they're just doing enough destruction behind your back, that's enough. Like that's problematic enough. But it really gets under my skin when you've got this person who's got all kinds of destructive behavior and their behavior is treated as somehow a relationship issue. It's not. It's an individual issue, and there's a huge ocean of difference there. And it's really important that people see that and to realize, okay, this isn't like our communication went off track. It's you were lying and cheating and stealing and siphoning funds and having a double, like this isn't things between me and you went south. It's you've got a ton of unresolved individual stuff going on. And I didn't realize it. We got into a relationship and now things just became absolutely bananas because this person's got all of this unresolved individual stuff. It's a huge waste of time and energy and emotions and money to get into counseling to try to resolve. And it messes with the person's head, and it's very re-victimizing to be treated like their awful behavior is somehow a relationship issue when it's not. So if you're dealing with a person that's got a ton of like individual stuff going on, I would encourage individual counseling. Like I would not, don't let them put their garbage on you, because they will. And if they get a therapist, because they're incredibly charming and therapists are people too, and they don't, it's sometimes, I'm sure it's really hard to sort out what in the heck is really going on here, because you have one person with their version of events, and then you have another person that's totally delusional with their skewed version of events. But, you know, if you can separate that out and just do your own, if you are in therapy, doing your own individual kind of stuff. But that was kind of a segue. Sorry, Phil. I went off track a little bit there. But there is a book out there. There's actually I have quite a few questions tonight about divorce and children and custody and couples counseling and all of this. There's a fantastic book out there. I highly recommend it. It's called Divorce Poison, and I should have written down the author's name, and I did not, but it was a book club book that we read a while back. You can get my notes on it on my website, thriveafterabuse.com. And if you go under book club and look up Divorce Poison, then you can see all my notes on it. But fantastic book. It talks a lot about this. It talks a lot about what often the next stage of this, it just keeps coming, doesn't it? The next stage of this is oftentimes manipulation, because they do have this very twisted, skewed version of things, and they often put this onto the kids too. So you're just dealing with a very sick and twisted, demented person. But that book is fantastic. It talks a lot about how to navigate custody, how to navigate a divorce, how to navigate if you're experiencing children that are being manipulated and turned against you, how to handle that. Ride asks, hey Dana, what do you think of Bessel van der Kolk's neurofeedback research on healing from complex childhood trauma? Gosh, that is a great question. I think it's really interesting, is what I think. And I know that he touches on, that was a book club book as well, The Body Keeps the Score, that we read a few months ago. Again, fantastic, fantastic book. If I remember correctly, he was a proponent of EMDR and EFT, the tapping therapy. But I know that he also had some concerns or some questions about like the effect, like that was some of the more effective therapies out there for dealing with complex childhood trauma, but potentially like to an extent. The book club book that we're reading for December 2016 is called Tapping the Healer Within. I just finished it a few days ago, and it is written by a doctor. I do not remember his name. I need to get an updated list of all the books and the authors. I keep thinking I'm going to keep them all straight in my mind, and I don't know why I keep thinking that, because I have the memory of like a goldfish. So, that I'm apparently in great denial about too. But in the book, Tapping the Healer Within, he talks about the tapping therapy and how successful it's been for him, and in like a wide range of trauma, a lot of which stemming back from childhood. Very interesting. He talks about it in terms of more of like releasing blocked energy. Very, very, very interesting stuff. I have never tried it. I would like to try it. I have a friend who actually just got certified in it. So I'm going to be seeing her probably in about 2 weeks, and I should record it. We should do a session, and I'll record it and then let you know. What I would be curious, what do you think about his research on it? Did you read the book? And if so, what did you think about the book? Let's see. Stella asks, Dana, any books you can recommend on helping children with complex post-traumatic stress disorder? That is a great question. None hop to mind that are necessarily geared towards children. However, I would say that Healing the Child Within would, out of all of the books that I've read on the topic, it's a good start, a really good start. Because with children, and of course, like children then become adults. So like a lot of our issues now as adults oftentimes stem from childhood, and it's just this unprocessed trauma. I think being aware of what is going on is a big first step. Like role modeling, appropriate communication is huge for kids. Talking about healthy boundaries, you know, just really keeping communication open is so huge. And realizing with kids, especially the younger children are, the younger children are, the less vocabulary and emotional awareness and self-awareness and the less autonomy that they have. So children are very much a prisoner of their environment, like the younger they are. And they act out a lot more, aggressively the younger they are. So if they don't have the words to articulate what's going on, and not even just the words, the understanding. I mean, I'm almost 40 and I'm just now like getting the words to articulate like what's been going on. I think that's probably common for a lot of us. I don't think this is something that people, it's not a skill that we just inherently have. I mean, it's kind of been, like just suffocated out of us at a pretty early age due to all of our cultural conditioning, really. So teaching alternatives, teaching how to handle emotions, teaching, okay, this is, anger, and it's okay to be angry, and here's how being sad feels, and it's okay to be sad, and here are some strategies on dealing with anger, and on some strategies with dealing with sadness, and, just, and with, I think with children, encouraging it to come out, because with kids, again, especially little kids, this kind of stuff comes out in ways that they often get punished for. So you oftentimes see children that are, maybe they're 5 to 9 years old, let's say, and their parents are going through a divorce or something, they're being abused in some way, shape, or form. Something's going on in their life that they can't handle emotionally. And so what oftentimes happens is they start regressing. So you see a lot of like bedwetting. You see a lot of, maybe they're wetting their pants at school. They're starting fights at school. They're screaming at home. They're screaming at siblings that are younger than them. They're screaming at the family pet. They're, coloring on the walls. They're doing things that's very out of character for them. They're like quote unquote acting up. And it's whenever we go through something traumatic, we all cope with it the best way we know how. And then when we know better, then we do better. But with kids, it's a challenge because they are at the mercy of their environment. They have no idea what's going on. They just know how they feel, and they don't really know how to feel better. So they do what they can to try to just get those emotions out. Yoga, I think, can be especially a great skill. I was talking to a friend of mine today. She is substitute teaching, and we were out at coffee. This was a few weeks ago, and we were working on stuff. I was working on my website stuff, and I was showing her these different study, focus meditation music things that are on YouTube. I'm like, yeah, these are so great. Like, I love these. Well, she ended up showing one to her class. She was substituting, I think, a class of like 4th graders or something the day, and was showing the kids this. And they were talking about, focus and meditation and all of that. And all of the kids just loved it. And again, like we just kind of think, oh, well, this is stuff that is reserved for adults. But it's not. Like there's so much benefit to taking a kid to yoga. I go to aerial yoga, not as often as I would like, but when I do get a chance to go, there's been a few classes where there's been a fairly young girl in there, she's probably 10, and I'm so impressed as to how good she is, and it really does a lot to just have a person focus, especially children, teaching focus, teaching how to unwind, how to turn inwards, how to trust our intuition, how to just be in tune with feelings. Journaling can be good. Art therapy can be really good, especially for younger kids at any age. I mean, color, you see these adult coloring books are real popular, coloring books for kids, and then having them explain, oh, this is a really interesting drawing. Why did you choose these colors? Why did you choose, tell me more about it. And then just really trying to draw them out by having them explain about their drawing and what things represent. You know, I think providing a safe space for kids to just open up. And again, like role modeling that behavior. One of the things that I used to work with at-risk teens in a group home. This was years ago. And so we had a lot of kids that were there that were in and out of gangs, and this was like an alternative to juvenile hall. Some of them had done some like really extreme things. And to try to get them to open up, one of the things that we would do at dinner time is we made it a point to always eat meals together, and then to go around the dinner table where everybody would talk about our highs and lows for that day. So like, what was the high point of your day and why? And then what was the low point of your day and why? And little things like that help people to open up and help kids to open up. And then when they kind of realize they're not alone in this, because I think that's kind of the theme to trauma in general with people, is this idea that it's only us that's going through this. And there must be something wrong with us. And I think there's a lot of validation that can come from realizing, oh, no, like we're all going through things. And so let's talk about that. It just helps to bring some perspective to that. And it also helps to kind of just model different coping skills and helping kids to just walk through this. If anybody comes across any books that are specific towards helping children with C-PTSD, please let me know. I will keep my eyes open for that. But that's what I would recommend at this point. So I'll be curious to see. Let me know if you try any of those strategies and how they work, and going from there. Let's see. That's a good question. Oh gosh. I cannot pronounce this name, so I am sorry. Patanya? I don't know. Says, Dana, we used to do this as a family too, and it was intensely traumatizing because I was always told that my feelings were wrong. No matter what they were, it has to be a safe space. Yes, and thank you for adding that. So I think oftentimes, adults either, I mean, if it's that where the adult is continually minimizing and invalidating, that, oh, that's crazy making. It's like, well, then why did you even ask me how I'm doing if however I feel is wrong, or you're going to argue with me? Like that's not a safe space. But I think even sometimes adults that mean well unintentionally cross boundaries and unintentionally invalidate children. It's kind of, oh boy, I tell you, and I'm sure I'm guilty of it too. It's, this idea of, oh, well, if they're telling you something, oh, this kid's bullying me at school or what have you, and then to say, oh, well, maybe that boy is pulling your hair or being mean to you because he likes you. Or, I mean, like, that's very invalidating and minimizing. And it's like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, like, if he likes that little girl or not. Like, it's not okay to be bullied. Or, for just to be argued with. Like, I think a lot of adults argue with children. You know, if kids say, oh, I had a really bad day, or they're unhappy about something, I think a lot of adults tend to say, oh, well, you know, I had it so much worse, or, you know, you have no idea, or, you know, get in line, kind of a mentality, which is, it's not helpful. You know, I think what is helpful is teaching kids that it's okay to have an opinion. It's okay to speak up about things that are going on, and for us to remember that, you know, that's part of childhood, is learning who they are, learning to trust their judgment. Oh, my phone's in the other room. I came across a great meme the other day that I took a picture of because it was so fantastic, and it talked about the quote was something like, I don't teach my children, something like, I don't want my children to respect their elders. I want them to respect their intuition. And that they will not be forced to, you know, hug or show affection, or to feel like their boundaries are invalidated just because especially if this other person, you know, is forcing themselves on them, that to teach children, like, it's okay to say no. It doesn't mean that it's disrespectful. It doesn't mean, like, you can still show affection without getting into somebody's personal space. And to teach this at a young age, there's just like so many things like that. You're like, oh my gosh, I just never really thought about that, and how awful, like, you know. So, but yes, allowing children, hearing children when they speak is huge. Diane says, somehow my feelings make my parents feel that something is wrong with them. Oh, I think that's so true. And I think that's so true for so many parents. If kids, even adult kids, right, say have any issue with anything, it's oftentimes like, well, but you know, you have no idea what I went through. You know, my father was so much more abusive, or you know, again, it's minimized and invalidated, and it may not even intentionally be this way. It's just they're comparing, like, it, I think a lot of people do this. Like, they do this to other people, where, you know, you go through you know, a narcissistic breakup, and people treat it like it's a bad breakup because they just don't understand. So then it's like, oh, well, you just need to kind of, you know, get over it, or you need to forgive and forget, or you need to do all these things. And it's like, where is the compassion? You know, where is the just letting somebody feel how they feel, and to just say, like, yeah, wow, that's intense. I'm sorry. You know, I'm sorry that you're going through this. And just sitting with them in their feeling, and just listening to them. That's such a lost skill that I don't know if I think it's just the world. I was going to say it's society, but like, I think it's a world thing. Kevin says, if I'm looking for approval for something, I find it helpful just to ask for it. Wow. Yes. Okay. Rainey. Oh my goodness. Rainey says, I wish I would have known that when my drunk uncle stuck his tongue in my mouth as a goodbye kiss. My mom taught me to never question the behavior of adults. Yuck. Yeah. Yeah. Not okay. Not okay. And this this is a totally, I think, the next part of evolution, of our understanding of emotional awareness. You know, because so many adults have this idea of, like, yes, you just, you know, you just be affected, like, you go give your uncle or your aunt a hug and a kiss goodbye, and you just, families forever, and you don't question things, and adults know best, and all of these things. And that there can be some truth to that, assuming that these adults are solid, good people who have the child's best interest in mind, and, like, the situation warrants it. But like that part of it, the whole like that they're solid, good people that have a children's best interest in mind and the situation warrants it, is like left out. And so what we're left with is this idea of adults know best, and children should be seen and not heard, and should just always go along with things. And it's awful. I mean, you think about all of these children that were, assaulted by priests, and how many, oh my gosh, like that's the ultimate authority, right? And how hard that must have, and that's why they didn't come forward for 40 years. And it was this feeling of like, nobody's going to believe me. Everybody's going to be angry at me because this person's a priest. We go here every Sunday. And, and of course the priests knew that, right? That was the whole like abuse of power behind it. It's disgusting. It's disgusting that the church knew this and let all of this happen. And it's disgusting that they just moved these priests from church to church. That's terrible. And there's just so much sickness and stuff that's just wrong with the world. But yes, teaching children, like, it is okay to say no. You have the right to your body as a child. You do not have to welcome any touch that is not okay with you, whether it's a hug, whether it's a handshake, whether it's a kiss, whether it's somebody who wants to snuggle with you, whether it's a strange person giving you a bath, or telling you a bedtime story, or taking you to the bathroom, or any of that. It is okay. You have the right to say, I'm not comfortable with that. And again, that's a skill that I think a lot of well-intended adults who have never come across anything problematic, their minds they don't even go to that level. They don't even think that other people could have bad intentions. Unfortunately, they don't think that way until something bad happens. And so this is why this stuff is so important to start talking to kids about at a very young age, and to help get them in tune with, okay, how does a good touch feel? How does a bad touch feel? And how, I will always believe you, right? Like, I am your parent, or I am your aunt, or I am your whoever. I love you, and I will always believe you, and I will always work in your best interest. And you can always come tell me these things. And letting kids know, and then and just keeping that conversation open, and not because out of fear that there's something bad's going to happen to them. This is just a life skill. Like, it's important that we realize what safe people feel like, and what dangerous people feel like, and what maybe just unsafe situations or unsafe people feel like. And what does it feel like when your boundaries have been violated? Right? These feelings of frustration, of irritation, of this little bug are still here, resentment, of anger, of distrust, and kind of just explaining how these are all feelings that something's off, and a change needs to happen in order for you to get back into alignment with you. And that, as your parent, as your whatever relation we are to them, what's right for us might not necessarily be right for them. And this is why it's very important for them to learn to think for themselves, and it's okay to question things. It's important to question things, and to not just take somebody else's truth as absolute truth, to be able to question that for themselves. And, it's all part of it. It's all part of setting up a child for success in this world. And as adults, I mean, because again, I think really this is just kind of this next wave of like emotional evolution is self-awareness. And it's not taught. I definitely was not taught, I don't think, really to my generation. And it's just now kind of coming into to being a thing, I think, for like this next generation. So, but Kevin, okay, I want to mention what he had said. He says, if I'm looking for approval for something, I find it helpful just to ask for it. So that, I want to read a quick question that I got that speaks directly to that, which I thought was fantastic. So your answer is my answer, which is cool that we have the same answer. So Vin says, okay, Dana, I'm out of social media and WhatsApp. I went a step ahead and got a new number as well. But somehow all these things seem like signs of weakness to my friends. They say I need to face my fears in order to heal. They make me feel like a coward when I'm doing a good job in staying away from my narcissistic ex. One of my friends, under the pretense of helping me out, told me that she had posted pictures of her new partner on Instagram, and it sucked the life out of me. These friends of mine are actually good people, but they simply don't understand what I'm going through. What do I do? So, you know, people can be so insensitive and hurtful. I just don't, it's infuriating, isn't it? Like, why on earth would somebody, like, really, like, did that need to be said? Like, do you really need to say to somebody, oh, I know you're hurting, but here's something that's really going to hurt you. She just posted more pictures of her and her new boyfriend. Like, ouch. Doesn't need to be said. Doesn't need to be said. So kind of a jerk face move on your friend's behalf, if you ask me. But I get it though. People really, they're not emotionally invested in it. So they just, like, the compassion and level of understanding is just not there. So you're not a coward, and you are facing your fears. You are doing what you need to do in order to stay safe and sane, which includes giving off social media for right now, getting off of WhatsApp, and avoiding this problematic ex. So you're doing a great job. Like, you're doing what you need to do. And other people, that's totally fine. The peanut gallery always has an opinion, right? So that's okay. Like, they can have their own opinion. You still need to do what's right for you. And so this is where Kevin's comment comes into play. If they're good people, they don't understand what you're going through, you can preface it like what Kevin was saying and say something like, if you're looking for approval or if you're looking for some sort of response, to just ask for it and say, you know what, you guys, I don't want to argue this. Like, I don't want to have to defend it. I'm hurt. Like, this relationship ended and I don't want to hear about it. I don't want to hear about if she's posting new pictures. I don't want to hear about how I need to do anything other than what I'm doing right now. So I really just need, okay, so this sets other people up to win, and just say, like, I really need for you right now to just show compassion and support and understanding and love for me. Like, that's what I need from you guys right now. So please don't, I don't want to hear how I need to be doing anything. I'm doing what I feel is right in order to in order to heal. And I would just hope that you guys could support me in that and not argue it with me. And then just leave it. And either they'll come around or they won't. And if they continue fighting with you every step of the way as you're trying to, implement boundaries, then it's going to just continue to be more exercises for you in boundary setting and holding your line. And it may also mean minimizing contact with people, because it's like, you don't need, there's the whole acronym that you might be familiar with. It's called JADE. It's basically justify, argue, defend, or explain. Like, these are things that you do not need to do when you set a boundary. Like, set a boundary and it is what it is, and other people are either okay with it or they're not. And if they're not, then you need to adjust accordingly, which generally means kind of distancing yourself from them. But I find it is helpful to set other people up to win, and because they don't get it. So saying, hey, this is really what I need from you guys. You can also preface conversations with that. I mean, I had quite a few with my mother, especially when I was going through all of this, because she just didn't get it. And it just sent me into orbit. I was so angry. It was like, how on earth would you think that I could maybe try to make something like this work? Like, what is wrong with you? You know, like, what planet are you from? No, this is not workable in any way, shape, or form. This is an individual issue, not a relationship issue. And no, I'm not doing that. And I'm offended that you would think so little of me, that you would think that I would need to get back into a situation like that. Ouch, really? So, setting that situation up ahead of time, being like, you know what, this is what I'm deciding to do. This is what I need from you, please. And then going from there. Okay, let's see. People are talking, oh gosh, about the peanut gallery. People, Kevin says, imagining rows of peanuts with disapproving faces, and people are talking about making peanut butter out of them. Yeah, I tell you, there's so many layers of this, and it's awful enough to go through a narcissistically abusive relationship, but then to be like minimized and invalidated and re-victimized by people that are supposed to be in your corner. It really does feel like I feel like I'm in the Twilight Zone. Like, what is going on? Why? I feel like I'm screaming into the wind. Like, nobody seems to understand me or understand this, and I can't get the support that I need. And it's just absolutely maddening when you just feel like nobody else gets this at all. It's terrible. It's a terrible way to feel. But if you're going through this, like, you were so not alone. You were so not alone in this. And it's okay to feel the way that you feel. It's okay to have boundaries. It's okay to do what you need to do in order to keep yourself safe and sane. It's self-protection. Totally okay. So let me scroll down here. Hey, Lucy's here. Truth seeker. People are still talking about peanut butter. Truth seeker says, how many steps to take? Crunchy or creamy? Oh my gosh. Note to self, do not upset truth seeker. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Okay. L says, how can a child be helped if they have developed narcissistic traits from a parent, or will they become a full-blown narcissist? Well, I think a lot of it is, so to a certain degree, narcissistic behavior is a normal part of a child's development. And there's different ages. I would say kind of when they hit the terrible, what they quote unquote terrible twos, where it's all about them, right? Like everything is mine, like mine, no. And it's all about learning to boundaries. It's all about learning our place in the world. And so all kids go through that stage. And then later on, when they become teenagers, they have this other wave of like autonomy that comes in where they're like, oh, okay, yeah, my body's changing, and now I have access to a vehicle, and I'm in high school, and it's this weird transitional time where it's like, in many ways they're an adult, but then in many ways they're still a child because they have rules and they live at home, but yet they're going through all of these very adult situations. I mean, high school for most people is awful, but it's sold to us like it's supposed to be this fantastic time, but it's not for like a lot of people. It's really stressful, and it's hard to kind of navigate all of this, and there's bullies and homework and peer pressure and just kind of a lot of it. So it's a lot for kids to go through. If they're younger children and you're seeing, you know, a lot of this acting out where it's, this level of entitlement, this bullying kind of behavior, I would try to nip that in the bud as soon as you can. And that can be exhausting because it can be an ongoing process. A lot of times what you're seeing with kids, especially if they've, if your ex was narcissistic and they did see a lot of abuse, and kind of realizing, okay, from this child's perspective, they've been growing up in a home with a very unstable home, with at least one parent that was incredibly unstable. And so that causes a lot of distress in children, because their need, kids do best when there is that routine, that consistency, that reliability with an environment. And if they don't have that, then they tend to try to do any number of things to try to get predictability and reliability in their life. So kind of realizing, okay, yeah, like they saw a bunch of stuff, and now they're acting in a bunch of ways that you're just like, this is problematic. Like, I don't want my kid to go down this path. I think it starts with communication, and realizing that probably a lot of these behaviors that you're seeing are their response to what they saw. So talking about, okay, how do we treat people? And why is this not okay? And trying to get them to articulate, like, what's appropriate behavior, what's not appropriate behavior, and why. So I would try to maybe reframe to yourself, because I'm sure this has got to be incredibly frustrating and upsetting on many different levels to see your child acting out like this, to try to kind of reframe your understanding of what you're seeing and realize, okay, this is not just them acting out, but these are some really great teachable moments here. And so, okay, this is what my kid's doing, and to just say, hey, you know what, this is how we share, this is how we go about doing this in this house, and this is how I really want you to treat people, and this is what being a good person means. And we're talking about this, or you're getting in trouble for this because I care. It's important that you learn these lessons in life. Like, I want to set you up to win, kid. So this is why. And just trying to implement, I think, that structure, but then realizing, keeping communication open with them, letting them know that you do care, and making time, quality time together is really, really important. I think a lot of kids, they do start acting out. It's more out of insecurity than anything else. So I hope that helps. Randy, I like that. Hey, Randy. Randy says, setting boundaries makes losers scatter. Yes, it does. And it's so amazing when we do start setting boundaries, how so many things just become like a non-issue. Like it's just, they just quit happening. Because, we deal with them when they are a pebble in our shoe versus waiting to deal with them until then they become this like huge mountain that we have to climb. So, and boundaries is a big part of that for sure. Intuition is kind of the like maybe more advanced part, I think, of setting boundaries, because if we can have the idea of something feels off here, we can start distancing ourselves from the situation before something actually goes off, like before something actually goes wrong. It's just that feeling of like, this isn't for me. And like that's when it starts getting really cool, because then we're not waiting. I think I'd mentioned this before. I had someone tell me, I had been dating this, I'd gone on a few dates with this guy. This was basically, this experience is what was the catalyst for me to start my blog, to start all of this. Because I was making myself nuts. I'm like, is it me? Is it him? What am I experiencing? He hasn't done anything for me to actually set a boundary. But there's been a lot, I just feel like something's off. I feel like something's off. I feel like something's off. Is something off? Like something's not really off. And she had said, she's like, Dana, you've seen this movie before. Like, you don't have to wait until the very end, until there's tears and, pain to realize I don't like this movie, to get up and leave. Like, you don't have to wait until it gets to that point. Knowing something's off, experiencing stuff that's not right enough is reason to leave. And she's was absolutely, I mean, that was such an aha moment for me. Like, I can't even begin to tell you. Like, that just was exactly what I needed to hear. And I did, and I called things off with him a few days later, and he went bananas. Thankfully, it was over the phone, but it was very clear, like, oh, yikes, yo, like, yeah. Like, he just started yelling at me, and I don't tolerate that at all. So it made it very clear, like, okay, that's way outside of, like, I made the right decision. Like, that's not okay. So, and what's interesting too with that is the healthier we get, the more in tune we get with our intuition and when things are off, and the less confused we perpetually are. Because we're like, yeah, you know what? That's a problem. The stuff that I experienced with that guy, if I were to even experience like a tenth of it today, I would be out the door and not even look back. At that point, and this was almost, 2 years ago now, at that point in my life, my judgment was still really, really skewed. I still had a really hard time. There was still a lot of the ripple effect from my previous relationships, where it was like, I didn't know who was safe. I didn't trust them. I didn't trust myself. I didn't trust my perception of events. And I didn't have apparently I didn't have good boundaries to begin with, even though I didn't realize that, but I didn't. And so I knew something was wrong, but I just didn't know what. And I kept getting tangled up with like all of these people with like online dating, where I'm like, statistically speaking, like, how can there be like this many like psychos out there? Like, how can this possibly be? It can't, like, what? Like, it can't, like, statistically speaking, it cannot be this many. So it's got to be me. And then I really felt like I must be just losing my mind. And I wasn't losing my mind. There really are that many people out there. But because my intuition was off and my boundaries were off and I didn't realize it, it's sort of like leaving your front door wide open. It's lots of random things are just going to walk through that front door. I've got a neighbor across the hall that would be walking through, I know for sure. And live in kind of a rural area, we've got wildlife. There would be crickets and cockroaches and deer and neighbors and just randomness would be walking through that door. And that's how it is. If we don't have solid boundaries, it's a crapshoot. Like there's just going to be a bunch of randomness that comes into our life, probably more problematic randomness than anything. And if we don't have that good sense of like what's deal breaker stuff for us, then, or if people, but kind of again, like how my thinking was, well, I need to wait until I see with apps, I need concrete proof that something's wrong in order to leave a situation. Well, if we're waiting for concrete proof to leave a situation, then we're leaving probably way too late, because it's the whole like where there's smoke, there's fire. So we don't want to wait until we see the house on fire. Like that's too late to leave. Like we need to pay attention. Are the smoke alarms going off? Do we smell smoke? Do we see smoke? Is our dog barking? Like these are all these different warning signs that lead up to, yes, indeed, there is a problem. But because if we're not wanting to see that there's a problem, which is oftentimes what it is, then it is amazing the stuff that we can deny. And of course, then the added part to that is if you've got a highly manipulative person who's telling you the whole time, oh, there's no problem, the problem's you, then it's really hard, if not impossible, to see things correctly. And it takes a person that much longer to actually get themselves to a place of safety and sanity. But yes, implementing boundaries, paying attention to your intuition is huge. It's huge. Once you start doing that, your life will begin to radically change. Radically. Like the friends you keep, the job you have, where you live, you're going to find things out about yourself. You're like, how on earth have I lived as long as I have and I did not know this about myself? The aha moments, the realizations that you're going to have about who you are and what you're about and what you need to thrive is just, it's going to be insight after insight after insight. And I think too, the added part of that, because those insights are so cool. Like they're really cool. But also the flip side of that is it's also very normal to have this sense of maybe like grieving or loss of like, oh my gosh, my life would be so different had I realized all of this 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 50 years ago. So that can be kind of the challenge with that comes along with self-actualization and self-awareness is, oh my gosh. But I just want you to know that a lot of people, this is very normal. I don't think it's like the rest of the world has a really good grip on this, right? And it's just us. It's most people don't. I think this is why most people, they tend to follow like this traditional path. Like they go to college or they go get a career of some kind, right? They follow this path that they think is the right path. They go to school, they get a good job, they get married, they have some kids, 5-10 years into it, they're like, yeah, I don't know if this is me. They start having this midlife crisis, they get divorced. Like that's kind of like the trajectory for the vast majority of people. And then they start realizing, okay, not only is this marriage not for me, my job is not for me, this town is not for me, all of this stuff is not for me. And I think a lot of people struggle with this feeling of, who am I? Who am I? And then they start looking outside of themselves to define that. It's kind of the stereotype that, then you've got this guy who buys a red Corvette, or a woman who, I don't know, gets a boob job, or whatever, and people, or like a bunch of plastic surgery, and people are trying, and it's a person's way of trying to figure out, what do I really want? What will make me happy? Who am I? And these are some really major questions. And again, like, we all do the best we can with the information and the self-awareness that we have at the time. And this is an ongoing thing as you go through life and start realizing these things about yourself. It's amazing how much of our lives we live kind of based on this default programming of who we were expected to be, or who we thought we should be, or, you know, like this path that we've been headed down, where it's like, okay, I didn't have another choice. Like, I had to be a wife and a mother, or a husband and a father, because I have to work this job. Like, I have to do this. Like, I don't have the luxury of doing anything different, because I have people that are relying on me. And so people then start feeling stuck in this life that's just not them. I think that's so, so, so common. So common. But we can start turning that around now by paying attention to, turning inward, examining, like, who are you? What are your likes? What are your dislikes? What gives you energy? What takes energy from you? What brings value to your life? And moving in that direction. So maybe some things, can't easily be undone, or the path can't, and maybe you wouldn't want it to be undone, but you can always just change. If you change your part in things, then really everything else tends to change as well. But it always starts with knowing who you are and knowing yourself as much as you possibly can at that given time. So there is, Marie, I think it was you, actually, speaking of boundaries and all this. That mentioned boundaries last time, and about and I had mentioned I would do a graphic, like an infographic image meme thing for the boundary, words, like, why, what's wrong with me? Why can't I remember my words? The boundaries, the different types of boundaries in that book, Healing the Child Within, which I am so in love with that part of the book. I thought it was brilliant, and I loved the fact that he did diagram it out. So I did. There is a link at the bottom of this. It is my website, thriveafterabuse.com/ and then there's hyphens between each word. What are healthy boundaries? And in that, it's a blog post I put together last week about the boundaries that he mentions, and then kind of my take on that. And there's a couple other images that I put in there about, I think, what a lot of us tend to do when there is a problem with boundaries, and some ideas about what would be like just kind of like appropriate boundaries after trust has been broken, and how to go about that. So the link is down below. I promised I'd post it. I did post it in the live stream for last week. I just don't know if anybody saw it or not. So for what it's worth. And Crystal says, does anyone else wish that they would just punch you already so that you can clarify that it's not you? You are so not alone in that. I think so many, and that might just sound really wild to anybody that's even listening to this chat that hasn't gone through what would be considered by most people to be more like covert forms of abuse. Because most people have this idea that abuse is physical. And abuse, not only is it physical, but it's something that leaves a bruise or a broken bone. So it's physical, it's visible, and it's something that leaves a major mark. Anything less than that is not abuse. And that's wrong. Abuse covers so much more than that. And physical abuse I used to work at a domestic violence shelter. I never once heard in my time there any anybody ever say that the physical abuse was the worst part. It was always, 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 it's the emotional, the psychological abuse that does the most damage because it messes with the person's relationship with themselves. It messes with their mind. It messes with how they perceive themselves and other people and their reality and their ability to trust and their ability to connect and all of this. And that's what really does the most damage. Physical abuse is not the problem. It's people stay in abusive relationships because of the emotional and psychological components to it. And of course that encompasses also like, verbal abuse and financial abuse and oftentimes sexual abuse and spiritual abuse. So there's so many different elements to it. But I think a lot of people are like, you know what? I wish I had some sort of concrete proof to be like, see, this black eye or what have you. This is what happened to me. This happened. And this is real. And it caused me pain, for people to really get it. But people, they just, like, it's amazing. They just don't get it. They just don't get it. And when you do get it, like, that's the added challenge is when you do get it, what is considered covert for most people, right, is now very overt to you, very obvious to you. So you see that stuff, you see that train coming miles away. So when somebody's talking to you about, oh, they feel crazy, is it them? Is it, is it you? Is it them? And is it's this and that and the lies? And like, oh, you're like, oh, no, that's projection, that's gaslighting, that's love bombing, and you just see it and people will think you're nuts, is what happens on the flip side of that, which is its own level of crazy making. But, it's just, most people are not awake to this. They're just not. But that doesn't mean that that we're wrong or that it's somehow us. Society is just not aware of this. Like I was talking about earlier, I really fully believe with every ounce of my being, this is the next stage in human evolution, is this emotional awareness. It's self-awareness is the next stage. So I know it might sound like a really bold statement to make, but I see it coming. Like, this is an epidemic. This is what's going on now on the planet. I mean, just to give you an idea, like my Facebook, so when I started all of this, right, I had no like intention or idea or even thought that anybody would really find my blog or that anybody would even watch these YouTube videos. If anything, it felt like I was putting a message in a bottle and I was throwing it out to sea and just hoping, like, I hope this just lands on the shore of the person that just needs to see it. There were no expectations. There were nothing. I didn't, like, as you can tell, I do not know what I'm doing with technology. So this has all just been this like really wild learning curve for me. But very quickly, I realized I went from working at this domestic violence shelter with a maximum, I think we had 14 rooms, generally not more than 20 people. I mean, and that was max capacity. We were very rarely at like max capacity. That was, the most I had ever worked with at any given time. And that was a lot. And then this stuff going online and realizing, oh my gosh, my website hit over 100 people in one day was just mind-boggling to me. Just absolutely like, oh my gosh, like this is a problem. Like this is I had no idea. And then as it continued and as it's continued to grow, I mean, it amazes me. I was talking to some of the moderators in my support group earlier about like, how are we going to handle this? Because it's like epidemic levels. I mean, we probably have over, I would say probably close to 250 people apply to get into our support. That's just my one Facebook group. I have close to 250 people that are applying to be into it every single day, easily, and that number keeps growing. So it's a problem. It's such a problem. But I'm sorry. So back to what you were saying though, is I think everybody feels that way of like, oh my gosh, I just, is it me? Is it them? What's really going on? I want some sort of concrete proof, some sort of validation that this is in fact a problem. And it's just hard to get, because the information out there about abuse, I think is for the most part inaccurate, and it's only a part of the picture. So and it definitely doesn't cover what men go through. So there's just, I mean, that was another thing I was thinking about this morning was, do you guys realize that we're making history? Like we're making history. Like this is a new thing. Talking about abuse here we have this group. We've got men and women here. And we're discussing abuse in terms of men and women. Like this is a fairly new phenomenon. Like this is just, we're on that like leading edge with it. All of these conversations, and of course it's not just me, right? It's like all of these different speakers that are talking about abuse, and we have these support groups. This was another part of the conversation I had with my moderators earlier with the support group, because that was one of the major decisions we had to make was, is this group gonna be women only, or is it gonna be, co-ed, or are we gonna start a men's only group, or how do we navigate all of this? How do we do this? And just, I've had so many men, like I started my channel off, my earlier videos, were all about, from a women's perspective. It was from what I went through. It was from what I saw when I was working at a domestic violence shelter. It did not talk about men at all. And it wasn't because I was trying to minimize what they went through. I just didn't know what they went through. I didn't feel qualified to even speak about it. But then I began having all these men emailing me. They're like, Dana, please. Like, I don't know what to do. And there's nothing for me out here. And then just really like, like your heart just breaks in half and you just realize, oh my God, no, there's not. I just never thought about that. And it's just, this stuff is just really, really wild, and it impacts everybody. And I just think it's so cool that we can have these conversations that we're having and making the decision that this ends. Like this ends with us. That we're going to teach our kids different. And we're going to teach our kids how to love themselves. And we're going to teach our kids how to have boundaries. And we're going to teach, like, this just, it ends. Like, it ends. It ends with me. It ends with you. And, like, we're breaking the cycle. Like, these conversations are us breaking the cycle. And, talking to kids and talking to little girls about appropriate boundaries and little boys about appropriate boundaries, and just questioning all of this, like what it means to be a man, what it means to be a woman, what it means, just all of this, because I think, again, like men have there's this whole other side to this with what they go through. It's very similar to what women go through, but it's kind of it's like this flip side of the coin where, they have their own set of challenges. And then here's the added challenge to all of this too, is trying to, approach all of this to where it doesn't become like an us against anybody kind of a thing. Like really making it about self-awareness and like our own journey, and not, because that's what I've noticed with a lot. And it's, again, like I think it's just the unintended consequences of actions that are taken. I don't think it was like with a lot of the, for example, if a lot of the information with abuse that's geared towards women, I don't think that it was intended to oppress or minimize men. I think that's just what ended up happening. And so a lot of these groups, again, like well-intended, I think it was very much, championing, like trying to bring awareness to, certain issues in a certain way, but then like the unintended consequence was very negative and it caused a lot of damage. And so I think the solution to that is for us to really realize that this is a behavior, like it's not a gender, and it's a, it's a behavior. It's not a religion or a nationality or a sexual orientation or an age or any of this. Like it's a behavior. And once we can see the behavior, because I see so much conflict, right? So people are like, oh, I'm never going to date, I'm never going to date men again, or I'm never going to date a redhead again, or I'm never going to date, I don't know, a Catholic again, or I'm never going to date an Italian again, or I'm never going to date, and it's so easy. This is what's fueled so much hatred for so long, is people misattribute cause and effect. It's this idea of, oh, well, these people are this caused me pain, and it was because of these people. And then they link up these incorrect cause and effect. It's like, well, this caused me pain. They were men. Men are bad. Or, you see this with racism a lot, right? Like, oh, well, this is why I don't like white people or black people or, whoever. It's like, it's not about that. It's like problematic behavior. Like you happen to be hurt by a certain type of person, but you're linking up like what's most visible. That's what oftentimes tends to happen. And it's not about that. It's the behavior. It was that person's behavior. And until we can fully realize that and learn the lesson, the right lesson with that it's the behavior, it's not the gender or the size or the nationality or the religion or the skin color or any of that, it's the behavior, then we're going to be doomed as a society to keep repeating the same mistakes. So I have not. Truth Seeker says, Dana, have you seen the documentary The Mask You Wear? I found it refreshing. Boys are bravely talking about their pain. I have not, but I will check it out. I would like to see that. I'll write this down. The Mask You Wear. Okay. So let's see. Let me... let's see. Elise says, the problem is more men have NPD than women. I know statistically speaking that is the case. However, I have to question the statistics because a lot of times those statistics come from a controlled population, which tends to be from prisoners. And more men tend to go to prison than women. even for the same crime. And I think men, by and large, tend to get diagnosed, these little bugs, tend to get diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder and antisocial personality disorder, whereas women tend to get diagnosed with borderline personality disorder and maybe even like some form of like psychosis, like schizoaffective or bipolar. I see this a lot. I see this a lot as a psychiatric nurse, where I just have to, like, a lot of these diagnoses. I'm like, yeah, you're calling it borderline. I'm not seeing it, and I see a lot of the intense, like, emotional, the intense emotions. But I see that with men too. It just is very few and far between that I've seen women or men be diagnosed as borderline, or women diagnosed as like antisocial or narcissistic. It just seems to be the default. So I don't know. I don't know. My guess would be that it's probably closer to 50-50. It's just, I think society has this idea that women, especially mothers, cannot be abusive. I mean, they've done studies with women that have been on trial for like murder, and where a lot of like different attorneys are like, man, they almost like they don't want their jury to even see their client, because it's like they know, okay, the jury's going to take pity on a woman. They're going to be more inclined to have sympathy for her. It's the whole, like, woman gets a speeding ticket and she starts crying. It's going to be more inclined to get out of it than a guy. So I think there's a lot of this kind of maybe even subconscious level of sexism that happens, where women do tend to get away literally with murder, whereas men don't. Munchausen by proxy tends to be like a female thing. I'm sure men do it too, but again, like, you have to, I don't know. And it's just interesting stuff. Yeah, Elise says, I'm beginning to see more narcissism rather than borderline. I've recently been told that even borderline is a way to cope with narcissism. I think, for me personally, just my 2 cents about it is, I think what we call borderline personality is, I think there's two things that are, again, me being an armchair psychiatrist, like, is if it's long lasting and it's stemming from something that's earlier in life, to me it seems like unprocessed trauma that is coming out, that would be very understandable, right? Like, if a person grows up with a narcissistic, abusive parent, they're going to have a poor sense of identity. They're going to have, a lot of this unresolved anger that's going to come out as rage. They're going to not know how to get their needs met. They're going to have a lot of this, just impulse control issues. They're going to have, again, like, just kind of this, a lot of like the suicidality, where it's very, very quick to be like, okay, well then if this doesn't work out, then I guess I'm just going to kill myself. Like, they're just really all over the place emotionally, and they're very unpredictable, and it's gotta be an incredibly difficult way to live, I can only imagine. My guess would be that is trauma. I mean, all of it's caused by trauma in theory, right? But like, I think it's really like unprocessed trauma, which would make sense if DBT is helpful. I think, though, when a person goes through a narcissistic relationship, like later on in life, like, let's say they're totally, quote unquote normal, and then they go through something like this, and then they just lose it. Again, totally normal response to a totally abnormal situation. And so then they're like, I don't know, like, I'm fine one moment, then I want to kill myself, and then I feel like I have PTSD, I can't trust anybody, I'm having nightmares. Like, if there's nobody there to say, hey, yeah, how you're feeling is absolutely awful, but it's totally normal given what you went through, and then explaining to them like the gaslighting and all of like the psychological abuse, which most people, myself included, didn't realize was even going on, if they're left to just try to figure this out on their own, then they're probably gonna be diagnosed as bipolar or schizoaffective or borderline, because they're acting like that. But it's unresolved trauma. So I don't know. Interesting stuff. Interesting tragic stuff is what it is. Let's see here. This is, oh, well, thank you. Elise says, you're doing a fantastic job teaching us, Dana. Thank you. Oh gosh, I'm a big fan. I'm so flattered and humbled and honored that you would say that. I'm a huge believer and fan of the concept that there is like the teacher, and then there are the students, and then between the two of them, that's like the teaching that happens, right? Like the lesson is between the two of them. But I think where things get really interesting is for anybody at any given time to be really flexible about what role they're in, like who is the teacher and who is the student. And if we can, because I tell you, I started doing all of this not because I have all the answers, because by no stretch do I, but just to start the conversation. And I have learned so much from my gosh, tens of thousands of voices in all of this, with people contributing. Everybody brings like their piece to the puzzle, right? And they're like, you know what? But here's what I realized. And they put that piece in. And you're like, oh my gosh, like that's a game changer. And then the conversation just shifts and evolves. And so when I say I really fully believe that the answer to all of this is within all of us, because we're all so needed to put this together. I just happen to be the one with the camera and the microphone, but it's, my gosh, it is so not me. It's all of us combined is where the magic happens, for sure. Dream says, why does my abuser pretend to be the victim? When he speaks to people about me, he speaks with so much anger, but he cheated on me and left my 3 children. Because everybody justifies our actions. And narcissists are no different. So, and that's what makes them so dangerous, is because when you have somebody that's justifying, when they're going through like these mental gymnastics to the place where they have totally flipped the script on what happened, and like they believe, I think like 9 out of 10 times, I think they really do convince themselves that they are the victim in the situation, because they have worked things up to where they just have. It's the whole line with abusive people. It's the, oh, well, look at what you made me do, right? It's the, I cheated because you were never home. I cheated because I could never talk to you. I cheated because, you're just so difficult. I cheated because, and it's like, look at what you made me do. See, really, you made me go cheat because of X, Y, and Z. Or you made me hit you because you should have known. You should have known that I had a hard day at work, and when I walked through that door and you asked me if I checked the mail, that, how selfish of you to ask me if I checked the mail. See, look at what you made me do. If you had been somehow better, different, this would not have happened. And that's the abusive mindset. That's why it's so dangerous. So, and this is why when dealing with an abusive person, it's not the behavior necessarily that's the problem. It's the mindset that's driving the behavior. So it's not just them like not hitting, it's the justification of all of their problematic behavior. That's the problem. And because if a person's not motivated to actually sincerely, honestly look at their part in things, they're not going to change. That behavior, it's going to still like seep out in other ways. So if a person's worked it up in their mind where they feel totally justified in, yelling at somebody or calling them names or hitting or cheating or doing these things, it's a big problem. And it's real easy for a person to continue doing those things because if they've already justified it to themselves once, then like that path, that neural pathway is already formed. Those excuses have already given. It's sort of like with, if I were to, I don't know, let's say if I were to be on a diet, right? And if I were to be like, boy, I really want some ice cream. And I eat some ice cream. I justify it to myself. Well, I've had a long day. I've had a hard day. It's not, I'll only eat half as much ice cream. Our brains will continue throwing out reasons until we find one that we're okay with. We're like, okay, I'll buy into it. Like, I'm okay with being okay with eating ice cream that's a small size instead of a large size. Okay. And then I do that. It's much easier for me to use that rationale next time around. So if I want ice cream again, being like, well, to find, but it's so much hard. It gets so much harder if you're on a strict diet, right? And it's that Pandora's box. Like once you're like, okay, well, I'm just going to have ice cream this one time. It's cracking that door. Like once you walk through that door once, it's really hard to shut it. And that's why, because if we're able to justify, especially something like cheating or lying or stealing, something that's really outrageous like that. If we're able to justify something like that once, it's really easy to justify it again. And so with abusive people, that's what they do. Because they're not accountable for their own behavior, it's this continual shirking of responsibility and putting it on everybody else. And because it's kind of this weird backwards wiring thinking that they have where they're, in their mind, they're like, well, yeah, I cheated. I guess you could call it that. But gosh, she did this and that. And of course they've got to, because they have to be able to rationalize their behavior. So they've got to work you up in their mind to be the problem, to be the cause of all their problems. So they can justify what they did. And this all ties into like this whole like lack of empathy, this lack of remorse, and this is the slippery slope to like really extreme, dangerous behavior where, like the kind of Scott Peterson kind of stuff, where it's just like, this person or, O.J. Simpson stuff. Yes, I know he was acquitted for his crime, but I don't believe for a second that he didn't do it. Given he had I didn't realize this until fairly recently, he had a very, very violent history with domestic violence with Nicole. I had no idea. So, it's not a coincidence. Like that stuff just doesn't happen. So I might catch a lot of heat for that, but if a person's justified in their mind, like beating somebody else up or stealing a car or siphoning funds out of a joint account or cheating or any of that kind of stuff, that behavior, this is why too it tends to get worse, because they've already justified it up to this point. It's not hard to keep going. So So let me scroll up. Robin asks, what are the chances of fixing or medicating or counseling a narcissist? Does it ever work? You know, oh, it's such a big question, and I think it's something that everybody asks. If it's personality disorder driven stuff, if they've pretty much, this is what they do, then generally no. And if anything, kind of what tends to happen is therapy often makes them worse. So a person, but let me back up a little bit and kind of give that a frame of reference. So hold on a second. I have these little. So, okay. For starters, let's just say there was an effective therapy. Because every now and again, I'll hear this. I'll hear kind of rumblings like, oh, there's this one clinic in so place that has they work with narcissists and they can effectively treat them. That doesn't matter. And let me tell you why that doesn't matter. Because even if there was an effective treatment, a person still has to be willing to be treated. Just like that, we know there's effective treatments for alcoholism. But if a person's not ready to quit drinking, they're not going to utilize the treatment. So a person has to sincerely want to change. In order for that to happen, generally what has to happen is they have to experience enough pain from their actions. It's like with alcoholics, right? It's just, you have to hit rock bottom. That's why they say you have to let this alcoholic hit rock bottom. You can't soften things. You can't call in sick for work for them. You can't make things okay for them. And you have to let them suffer these natural consequences, because if you don't, they're not going to experience enough pain from their drinking to actually be motivated to change. With narcissists, oftentimes they feel justified and entitled to treat other people the way that they do. It's all about them all of the time. And because it's all about them, they oftentimes do not think that they have a problem. And it's everybody else has the problem. So it was like what I was saying a second ago, where it's this attitude of, look at what you made me do. Right? That shows right there, like there's a blinding degree of like a lack of accountability for their actions. That's not workable stuff. If a person can't be honest with themselves, let alone with other people, and say, yes, this is, and sincerely honest, I should add, because a lot of times narcissists will just, like a little kid, they'll just say whatever they need to say in order to get out of stuff. But, if they're not sincerely 100% accountable, and by that, I mean somebody's saying, being sincerely accountable does not mean you pulling the truth out of them. It does not mean them continuing to lie. It does not mean them continuing to have the behavior. It does not mean any of that. It means being fully open and honest about what a person did, and then taking massive, consistent action to repair the damage that's done. Narcissists generally never really do this. It's just all about them all the time. So, if a person doesn't want help, if they don't think that they have the problem, if they feel entitled to act the way they do, if they don't have empathy and remorse, you could drag them to therapy, but odds are it's not going to do much good. And in addition to that, there's just kind of this whole theory behind narcissism where they... kind of how do I put it? So kind of the whole kind of concept behind like personality formation or personality development is that like in a healthy home, a healthy person would develop like a solid sense of self. We would have a solid sense of like who we are and what we're about. And let me show you. I drew it out in case I touched on it. Okay, we would have like a healthy self-orientation, which looks something like this. So on like one end, It's backwards for me. On one end, you have narcissism. On the other end, you have codependency. So I think it's helpful to look at it like this is just, and everybody's on the spectrum. I think is another thing that's helpful. So it's not kind of wondering like, well, like, is there a problem or is there not a problem? Like, we're all on here. Every single living human being is on this spectrum. And it ranges, let's just say, like it ranges from codependency to like a positive 10 on this side, and then narcissism, we could say like a positive 10 on that side too. Okay, and healthy would be somewhere in the middle. Like let's say give or take like, I don't know, 2 or 3 points on either side. And so if you look at it as far as self-orientation, like you have narcissists, which are like takers, and then you have codependent people, which I like to consider more givers. And so the self-orientation for narcissists is it's a me first attitude. And with codependent people, and again, I'm putting that term in quotes, I know it's really emotionally charged, and a lot of people just shut down when they hear that term, and I don't want that to happen, because if the term's getting in the way, don't use it. We'll just use a different term. So if you look at codependency in terms of giving, right, it's more of this. So narcissism is a me first attitude. Codependency is more of a you first attitude. This is like it's like a sense of self-orientation, sense of self. It's thought that narcissists tend to grow up in a way where they don't develop a solid sense of self. Instead, they develop what's called like a false self. So they develop a self of who they feel they either should be. It tends to be a self that's developed out of insecurity. So that's where you see a lot of like the grandiosity and the arrogance and the entitlement come from. Codependence, it's more on the other side where there's that giving. There isn't the same. There's not a solid sense of self there either, except there's not so much of a false self that's developed. There's just no self. There's no real clear sense of self there. Because we're so used to kind of going along in order to get along, or it's about everybody else and ourself is always last. And we're continually trying to fit into this mold of like what's acceptable, that we don't have a real clear sense of identity. So how all of this fits in is if a person doesn't have a very clear sense of self, or especially with narcissists, they have this false self, then when they're in therapy, the therapist is dealing with the false self. They're not dealing with, a person has to be grounded enough and has to be at the place where they're able to be open and honest, starting with themselves. But with that, when you're dealing with that false, it's so weird, right? Like that just sounds so strange. But when you're dealing with that false self, you're not dealing with the person. Like you're dealing with basically pure ego. You're dealing with this insecure kind of monster. It's this underdeveloped sense of self. And that's a lot. I mean, that's a lot. It's hard enough so basically you've got to tear down that false self, so to where you get to like nothingness, and then start like rebuilding a healthy sense of self. That is really, really tough, really tough. But with that said, I'm just going to say this because I get messages every now and again from people that are either concerned that they are a narcissist, or they really feel that they are a narcissist. If you see problematic behavior inside of yourself, and we all have it, okay? There's always going to be things about yourself that you don't like or that you want to change. Especially if you have some sort of like destructive behavior, right? Where you're finding like, boy, I lie a lot, or I cheat, or I do whatever. Like if a person's doing that kind of stuff and they're like, you know what, I want to stop, Like, I don't like who I am. If you are open and honest enough with yourself to realize that you have a problem and you're actually motivated to change it, then go for it. Work towards changing it. So don't let labels limit you. But that's, again, I think the people that email me or leave comments or what have you on these YouTube videos, if they are sincere in that, I'm talking to them. The people that have no like empathy or remorse, they're a million miles away from change. They don't even realize they have a problem. Dragging them into therapy and trying to get them to change, it's seriously going to be like it's the whole analogy of like trying to put lipstick on a pig. Like, you're just going to frustrate the pig and you're going to annoy yourself. Like, it's just, or vice versa, you're going to annoy the pig and frustrate yourself. Like, it's not going to work because they don't want to change. So that's why it tends to not work. I definitely would not recommend couples therapy. I think that's probably the worst thing that you can do with a narcissist, because you're being open, honest, sincere, and truthful about what's going on and your concerns. But because you're bringing up, so here's another component to this, because you're bringing up issues with them. So part of narcissism is, it's like this fight response where they are continually in this like fight response. So if they even perceive that you're challenging them in any way, this is why like their behavior is so erratic and so bizarre. If they even perceive that they're being threatened or attacked, they go on the defensive. And when any of us gets defensive, I mean, you think about it in your own life, right? Like, if somebody says something and you get defensive, there is no more communication possible. Like, you've shut down because now you're on the defensive. For a narcissist, it's that much worse. So they're not grounded in that therapy session. And my guess would be is they probably have their defenses way up before they even walk in that door. Because in their mind, here's this therapist, right, who is going to have this like insight into human behavior, and they're going to be talking about very deeply personal things, and they're going to be bringing up like issues with them and with the relationship. So they have all of these defenses up, like way up, right when they walk in the door. So the therapist isn't engaging with them. They're engaging with that false self. And that false self is going to most likely be either really just unconscious, like just not aware that they have a problem. And which hopefully that would be the case, because I think most therapists can see that for what it is. If this person's coming in and they're like, well, I don't have a problem at all, and I just think I'm the perfect partner, and it's all with her. If there's like zero insight, I think most therapists can see that. Where it gets tricky is when you have a highly manipulative person that then starts saying everything that they think the therapist wants to hear. And they are future faking, and they're talking about all kinds of things, but they don't do anything to actually change. It's sort of like people that talk about how great of, and they're narcissists that do this too, right? That talk about how spiritual they are, or talk about how Christian they are. And then my grandfather was one of them. He was a minister. So here he is every Sunday getting up and talking the talk. Boy, I'm sure could like really talk the talk. He was very charismatic, but then was like doing the most unchristian things, the other 6 days of the week. The hypocrisy was wild, but they're able to separate that stuff in their mind. They're able to compartmentalize these things. So it's the human psyche is just very, very, it's fascinating stuff. So that's why that they tend to not change. There's just lots of different things at play there. I hope that helped. Evie says, I think my last therapist was a narcissist. possibly, they are out there. So again, this goes back to, you know, trusting your judgment about things, because yes, highly problematic people are out there. And because it's a behavior, right? I wish we could say, yes, all highly problematic people are purple and they all work as, gardeners. Like, then it would be really easy to spot them and we could all avoid purple people that garden. Unfortunately, it's not like that. And so they do tend, I'm sure, I would guess, like psychology, because most people, I think in general, tend to get into things, they want to get into things that interest them or things that they're trying to figure out about themselves or their own life. When possibly with a narcissistic person, it's the idea of, would be a really great way to have ultimate power over another person. So they are out there. They are in many different professions out there. And so this is why it's important for us to pay attention to the behavior that we're seeing and to not get, sidetracked, or to not get, to not fall into thinking that just because a certain person has a certain profession or a certain title, or as a certain gender or a certain size or what have you, that makes us question what we're experiencing. So if we're experiencing something that's off, realizing that it's off and it's okay to distance yourself. But, and I had this experience, I've shared this before, I don't know if you heard this, but this was years ago when I was in college, and I had decided I was bulimic when I was in high school, and I've had body issues and like weight issues on and off, fluctuating my whole life. And I had joined this group. It was on this college campus, and it was all about, kind of just exploring body issues. Well, the therapist, it was a student therapist, the guy that was leading the group, interestingly enough, was legally blind. And so I thought at first, I'm like, oh, this is going to be really cool because this guy's legally blind. So I was kind of under the assumption that he wasn't going to be making any assumptions about my body, and I would feel really safe with him. Well, so we had our first like initial session, and he just was like perving out, and it was asking a bunch of inappropriate questions, and it was kind of everything that was like skirting the line of like, like he could have made the argument that he didn't mean it to be inappropriate, but I'm like, when somebody's being creepy, when things are weird. And like, so that session ended, and I had told the therapist that I was normally seeing, I said, I'm not going to continue. I feel like he was really inappropriate and made me very uncomfortable. And she argued my reality with me by saying, she's like, well, no, he's a really nice guy, and it must have just been you because, Dana, he's blind. Like he couldn't see your body. And I'm like, yeah, I get that. Like, I understand how weird this sounds, but that doesn't mean that he's not a creep. Like, just because he's blind doesn't give him a free pass to be a creeper. So, and I didn't go back. And it was like this whole thing in like the therapy department. It was just awful. And because, she was a student therapist, he was a student therapist. And then of course I felt like I was on trial and having to defend my reality. So, but the point is yes, like there are rotten people in every single profession, and therapists are people too. There's a lot of great ones out there. The good ones out there are worth their weight in gold. But so same with like accountants and financial planners and guidance counselors in school, or professionals of any kind. Doctors, lawyers, But yeah, there's manipulative, crappy, awful ones out there too. So, uh, Anthony says, have you had a narcissist find you on YouTube and pursue you as a challenge since you're such an expert? Uh, yes. I've had quite a few really weird experiences since being on YouTube. What I've had is I've had a few people that I would guess were, I don't know how they came across my videos. I don't know if they were curious about narcissism, if my videos just came up in a video feed or what, but that had emailed me and started off like fairly normal, and then like things began taking a turn, and not good. And yeah, I had one guy who I would say was like a complete psychopath, who was that was a scary situation. I don't even want to say what he was saying out loud in case he's still watching. I don't want to feed into that at all, but like, or give him like any sense of importance that he starts up with that again. But he'd sent me some really scary messages, basically insinuating, you know, that he wanted to kill me, and that this would be, that I would, like, that I would be like the ultimate prize. So, and the cops were called. Actually, the FBI, that went all the way up to the FBI. So there's been some really scary stuff. But I also some of my patients are pretty scary people too. So that one particular guy rattled me pretty good. I'm not gonna lie. But it's one of those things, like, this is what I want to do with my life. This is what I'm going to keep doing with my life. I'm not going to let anybody deter me. And so I'm just going to double up my efforts on being aware of my surroundings, and you just move forward. So, but yeah, and probably even more so than that is when it's difficult when you're getting between, like, it's a hard line to walk with talking about narcissistic abuse without getting between an abusive person and their partner. Because that, and like, in getting in between an abusive person and their partner on like a mass level like this. Because at the domestic violence shelter, that was scary enough. Like, there were many a night where I would get out to my car and you're walking out to this parking lot and you're thinking, is somebody going to jump out? Did somebody cut my brakes? Because now you're the enemy because you're helping them escape. And so that's scary enough when you're dealing with, 14 people at a time. But when you're dealing with hundreds of thousands of people a month, for me, I very quickly realized, I feel like I'm painting like a big target on myself. And that was very unsettling for a very long time. For like the first probably year that I was doing my channel, I lost a lot of sleep over that, because I can't unsay anything that I've said. Like, all of this stuff is out on the internet. I mean, kind of doing damage control at this point. It's like really behind the ball. It is what it is, But yes, the scary guy that I broke up with right before I started my YouTube channel and everything, it was weird. Like, when I had told him, like, I am a psychiatric nurse, and this is my interest and this is my passion, I could tell in his voice that he was really excited about that. And I think he was excited about it on two levels. One, it was this idea of, oh, you are really into psychology. Oh, this is going to be fun. Because that guy was seriously like psycho. And I know, like, I've been around enough of these people where I don't get overly hung up on the terminology, but you just kind of know. Like, you know when you're dealing with a narcissist, you know when you're dealing with like a sociopath, and you know when you're dealing with like that dark energy of like a psychopath where this person is intentionally out to like destroy a person. It's terrifying. But with him, yeah, it was very much this idea of, yeah, this is going to be fun. Like, you're into psychology, like, yay. But then it was also, and you're probably really have really poor boundaries, and you're a people pleaser, and I'm going to be able to really rope you in because you're a nurse. That was like the instant vibe that I got with the way, just his response to that when I told him what I did for a living. So, yeah, yikes. Okay, so Phil is talking about his daughter who's not in his life. So Phil, something that you can do is, because the courts aren't helping, I would encourage you to start putting a box together and of birthday cards, of Christmas presents, of letters, of things, if you don't have contact with her, to put these things in a box. Or if you have access to possibly another family member that, you know, um, something, something. So maybe that at some point down the line, you could say like, okay, this is what, like, you do care, and I have wanted to try to get in touch with you and to be a part of your life, and I wasn't able to. So that book, Divorce Poison, is really, really good and talks a lot about how to handle. There's a term for what you're going through. It's called parental alienation, and it talks a lot about that, like how to combat parental alienation. So it's a good read. Carolina, it's interesting. Says, I know when I'm dealing with a narcissist or sociopath, I have the urge to deck them. If they're histrionic, I feel the urge to shake them, to snap out of it. And if they're borderline, it gives me the urge of utter annoyance. That's interesting. I heard a uh, a hold on a second. Let me stop the chat here. Um, I came across an article the other day online, and I think it was written by a therapist. I wish I had written down his name. It was he really did a great job of kind of summarizing the differences between, or how he viewed the differences between a, uh, a sociopath and a psychopath. And I don't remember what he said for a narcissist, but like a sociopath, he viewed as he called it the creepy clown, and psychopaths were like this detached hunter. And I thought that was very accurate, because sociopaths, it's definitely this mask of superficial charm, uh, and like superficial charm hiding the creepiness and the destruction behind it all. And with psychopaths, it is, you just get this, they just don't care. Like, they aren't trying to impress you. They might have some degree of like superficial charm. The overriding feeling that you tend to get when you're around like a psychopath is that feeling of like death, like dark energy, that they are going to hurt you, that they just, there's nothing, it's like that feeling that there's nothing human there. It's this pure predatorial vibe that you get. It's unsettling, to say the least. So You know, with narcissists, I think with most narcissists, you know, the vast majority that I've come across that have been more of that just pompous, arrogant, pompous, ridiculous. I mean, ridiculous. Like just saying, just the grandiosity is just jaw dropping. You know, they think they're as smart as Socrates. They think that they are, you know, it's just like it's just ridiculous. Like the arrogance and they're just so full of themselves. They really don't tend to have that insight that there's a problem there. I think a lot of and that's and maybe like it's a combination of arrogance and entitlement and the feeling of like dealing with a brick wall because there's just no insight. Like they just don't frickin' get it, and it's exhausting, and you can talk until you're blue in the face, but it's just never ever ever their fault. Whereas a lot of what I think many people experience, it's more of that superficial charm where it's more on like that. And again, to me, they're all shades of the same color. It's sort of like trying to figure out which poison am I drinking? Like, is it strychnine or is it arsenic or is it bleach? Like, it does not matter. Like, they are all equally dangerous and damaging. I wouldn't stick around for any of it. But I thought that was an interesting way to kind of put it. Carolina says, my narcissist is so arrogant and full of himself, like Socrates, but has the vocabulary of a ninth grader. Yeah. Oh, it's just... Oh, I think don't get me wrong. North Went South said coverts are not full of themselves. Oh, I think they're all full of themselves. I mean, I think you have to be, right? Like if you have that much of a entitlement mentality that, like, to me, this is how I kind of view it. Because I think at the core of all three of those is narcissism. It's very much like if you look at that spectrum again, right? It's very much on that it's the me first mentality over here. So I'll turn this into like I just scribbled this out like 30 minutes before we started, so I need to think about it a little bit more. But and I'll make this into like an image. So I put on here on that me first side of the spectrum. So healthy narcissism is the idea of like, hey, why not me, right? Like, yeah, I can do this. Like, why not me? Why not now, right? Then it starts kind of like getting into problem area where it becomes a me first. This is what you see within children, within teenagers, within people that just stay stuck there, like narcissists, where it's that level of entitlement of, mine, right? So then it kind of progresses to it's all about me. Then it progresses to it's me at the expense of you. Then it progresses to it's me at the destruction of you. Then it progresses to it's me at the destruction of you and me. And this is where like you see a lot of like, murder, suicide or murder, where they're like, you know what? They work it up in their mind that other people are the problem. So in their mind, their target's the problem. And they're like, you ruined my life so much that I'm willing to kill you and go to jail, throw their life away. I'm willing to throw away my life in jail because of you're the problem. Like it's to that level of delusion. So highly, highly, highly problematic. But yes, anybody that's past that level of healthy narcissism on that scale, it's a problem. Like they don't need to have a full out personality disorder in order for it to be a problem. Like if a person's at that level of it's all about me, that's a problem. If you're dating a 2-year-old in an adult body, that's a problem. If you're dating a 16-year-old in an adult body, that's a problem. Like anybody that has that mentality where they don't have the capacity to be emotionally available and open and honest for other people, that's a problem. Like there is no relationship potential with somebody that doesn't have room. When it's all about them, there's no room. There's no room for you. It's all about them. That's a problem. So, um, oh my gosh. Let's see. Okay, Adriana says, Dana, what would be the best way to escape a psychopath? With a plan, carefully. I think any of these. So, you know, when people are in a narcissistically abusive dynamic, there's a lot more in common with a hostage situation than there is a relationship. And so it's very much like, how do you free a hostage, right? Or if you're a hostage, how do you escape? And you would be wise to come up with some sort of plan and to think ahead as much as you possibly can, given the information that you have. I'm a big fan in any situation of erring on the side of caution. So especially if you are feeling this person is dangerous, they're destructive, if they've ever had especially if they've had a history of being dangerous and destructive, I would assume that they will be that way again. And they're often that way when their target goes to leave, because they're losing. Abuse is always about power and control. Always, 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 right? It's about power and control, not about gender and strength. Power and control. So it's about power and control. When they start to lose power and control over their target, that's when they become unpredictable, and you don't know what they could potentially do. So they're just very unpredictable. I would consider talking to like a domestic violence shelter in your town and formulating a safety plan, an escape plan. If it was me, and if I really felt like my life was in danger, and I would think you basically need to do whatever you need to do, by any means necessary, to keep yourself safe. Whatever that might mean in your situation. It might mean moving. It might mean, like it just quitting your job. It might mean changing your name. It might mean, it just depends. It so depends on the situation. And I don't want to scare you, and I don't want to take this to a level it doesn't need to necessarily go to, but you're not crazy. You're not crazy. You know your situation best. And so it's really important that you realize that, and to take whatever steps that you feel are important and that you need to take in order to keep yourself safe. So yes, Truth Seeker says everyone should follow their gut feeling with their particular narc. Yes, I agree completely. Always, always, always. That's the big thing with all of this. Like, it's that self-awareness, and it's that trusting your gut feeling, trusting your intuition, trusting your own moral compass of what is right thinking. It's questioning everything, and it's thinking for yourself. and it's taking the action that you feel that you need to take. Because I tell you, not just with this, but with society as a whole, it's when people quit questioning things and when they start going with the flow and thinking that everybody else somehow knows what's right, that's when things get crazy. That's how crazy things happen. So, just because something is legal does not mean something is right. Just because, somebody is an authority on something doesn't mean that it's right. Just because, an adult, or a parent said something doesn't mean that it's right. Just because a religion says something doesn't mean that it's right. And so just, like we have to be able to navigate this own line of like what is right ourselves and be able to question things and be able to stand up and say, this is not right. I'm not okay with this. Because throughout history, there's been a lot of things that are not right that like were law, that were, that the vast majority of people thought was okay. I mean, slavery comes to mind, right? There was this idea of, oh, well, this is, and it's this stuff that people justified, right? Like, well, it's in the Bible. Like we can, this is what it means, and so now we're okay doing that. Like what? Like it's crazy the stuff that people were able to justify in the name of God, in the name of all kinds of things. So, I mean, that's an extreme example, but I think it's a very valid example. It shows how toxic and how scary groupthink can be when you get enough people around an idea where it's now all of a sudden like what's right is not what's legal. Same thing with the Holocaust. And, all of a sudden like it was law. Like you had to turn in, Jewish neighbors that were hiding. Or if you knew of something, you had to follow the law. And so what ended up happening is you had a bunch of law-abiding people that were doing a lot of really heinous crimes against humanity. And so when of course the Holocaust is over and they had all of these trials, all these people were now on trial and we're like, okay, well now what's your excuse? And people were like, I don't know, like, it was the law. Like this is what we did. This was the thing, right? Like this, I thought I was doing the right thing because this was the law. But at the end of the day, it's so important that we question things and think about, okay, is this right? Is this right? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what our parents think or what government tells us or what religion says or what any of it. Like we have to think for ourselves. So that was maybe kind of a tangent. But like, it's just narcissistic behavior at any level is a problem. That's the point of that. And when you get narcissistic people in power where they start thinking like, yeah, I am totally entitled to own another human being or to treat another human being in this way or to do all kinds of disgusting, horrible, just outrageous things to human beings. Like we've got to be able to spot problematic behavior when we see it and act accordingly. I know this is a huge topic for people, especially in the United States with the recent election, all politics aside. And this is something that I do need to address in like a different video and talk about it because I think it is worthy of bringing up for sure. Let's see. Oh, okay. I don't know what Marie is. Somebody's talking about the concept of a constant, which I love. I think that's the most brilliant idea ever. So real quick, okay, so I think they're talking about the concept of the constant in terms of like what's right and what's appropriate. I think there's also kind of a framework of understanding of what we can consider to be appropriate behavior. So if you kind of okay, if you kind of back up and you realize, okay, there's certain concepts, like we have the right for self-protection. You have the right to protect yourself. You have the right to survive because you have the right to survive, right? You have the right to self-protection. You have the right to self-ownership. You have the right to self-sufficiency. You have the right to just to freedom, to having power and control over yourself. And it's problematic when other people start trying to get power and control over others. So, especially if it's, and I think a good way to kind of to see is if you can you to look at a situation and ask yourself, can I universalize this? So, because it's so hard for us to think clearly if we're emotionally invested in it or if it's always been the way things have been. It's hard for somebody to be like, hey, wait a minute, like I don't know, this doesn't seem right. If we can say, and I think this is the core of the, treat others like how you would want to be treated. So would you want somebody to treat you that way? Would you want to be sold into slavery? Probably not. So then that's a good sign of that's not something that should be done. You know, if it's legal for one group, but not for another, like that's a sign of injustice. That's a sign of inequality, something that needs to be addressed. You know, I think those can be some good, but again, like all of this stuff, where it gets skewed is that's assuming that the person has, like, would I want that done to me, like to a manipulative person, that they would be thinking like, well, yeah, I would want second chances and 20-second chances and all. And so all of these concepts that are kind of initially make sense and, are reasonable and rational, when they're viewed through the lens of a highly manipulative person, they take on they're manipulated, it's skewed. It's like looking at them underwater. Like they kind of make sense, but then they kind of don't. And that's what's so tricky with manipulative behavior is it's twisted. Like it's just twisted. But I think the concept of the constant, where that can kind of come into play in all of this, especially when navigating kind of what's normal, what's not, as far as everyday, especially everyday type of dynamics or relationships go, is asking yourself, who is one person that I really trust their judgment? And so to kind of use them as like this baseline for what's normal. So for example, my brother is my constant. And I know him, obviously. I trust him. He's a good guy. He's got a solid moral compass. I've seen him interact with other people. I know how he treats women. So if I encounter anything that seems a little bit like, oh, that's kind of weird, I think to myself, what would my brother do? Like if I were to send him these texts right now or tell him what's going on, how would he react to that? And then that kind of tells me if there's a problem or not. So it's just kind of, it's a way to kind of get some validation if you're confused. But really, frankly, experiencing confusion with wondering whether or not you're experiencing is problematic is odds are it's problematic. So, because we don't wonder if something's problematic, and generally unless it is. So, I have some questions. I just realized I haven't really I've only gotten through one of these. So let me read a few of these here. Okay, so one of them is from Hope. Hope says, "Hi Dana, I am wondering how to settle on a child custody arrangement with my ex-narcissistic husband. Because I go to work early, he swings by and picks them up every morning and takes them the 10 to 15 minutes to school, and that's it. Otherwise, he hardly sees them at all. They are teenagers, 14 and 16, and there's a lot of driving and emotional stuff as well as schoolwork and friends. I deal with everything and he has just left me to it. He thinks he is seeing them enough. I do absolutely everything else. We are only separated 3 months and I am becoming exhausted as I have always have to be on and feel I'm never free for a little bit of time for myself. Am I being selfish? I love them both to pieces, but I feel like he is not doing enough. However, as I am more or less no contact with him, am I better off just leaving things as they are? And are they better off having as little contact as possible as he is such a negative person? I am looking after myself and doing well. I am a trained counselor and have lots of friends as well as a busy full-time career. The kids are doing fine and the atmosphere in the house is much better. We have just started mediation. And I am nailing the gray rock. I fall apart afterwards, but he doesn't see that. Love all your work and thanks ever so much. Hope. Okay, first off, awesome job at going gray rock and staying gray rock and keeping it together enough that you then fall apart later. That is huge, huge. So yay you for that. The second part is no, you're not being selfish. It is a lot to go from to doing all of this yourself and to try to, you're falling apart emotionally. These, kids they're teenagers. And like you said, there's a lot of stuff going on. What you're going through, you guys are all in a state of huge transition. And it's very normal that anybody would be very overwhelmed with all of this. So totally normal. I would say, so here's the thing though, and you know this, right? But you don't have any control over him. So, if he is incredibly negative, it's probably better that he's not wanting to be overly involved. If he's just going to be bringing a bunch of like negativity and manipulation and toxicity to things, again, like it depends on kind of a lot of his behavior. But if it's, I would kind of do what you do have control over, which is working with these kids. Thankfully, they are older, right? They're 14 and 16, so they're not like 4 and 6. So you can, have conversations with them. They can be, somewhat unsupervised, where you can go take a hot bath at night, right? They're not just doing, well, I was gonna say they're not doing God knows what, like a 4 and 6-year-old, but that's that's not the case because they're 14 and 16. But they can, they're with friends, they're doing their thing. So I would make your self-care a huge priority right now. And you said that you've got this active social life and what have you. If that means taking some time out of your social life and being like, you know what, okay, I need to really take some time at night, take a hot bath, just unwind. There's great videos on YouTube that are like guided imagery, guided meditations, relaxation videos, 20 minutes while you're going to bed at night. Just doing these things, throughout the day, can really just do a tremendous amount of good for your peace of mind, for your sanity, to help kind of get you regrounded in all of this. Possibly even some different like divorce support groups. I'm sure that there's quite a few of them out there for both kids and for you. Might be some options. And, I would encourage talking to the kids, just keeping communication open. I'm a huge fan of eating dinner together at night. I know that's with teenagers, that can be like herding cats, but like doing these things where you're okay, guys, like we're all in transition. This is a brand new chapter in our life and what's going on. Let's talk about highs and lows. Let's talk about how we're feeling, and really listening to them, taking what they're saying seriously. And of course, they're probably going to be hesitant to say things because they don't want to hurt your feelings. And having that open, honest communication can be difficult, and it can be difficult to hear. But trying to just foster that environment where it's like, okay, this is a safe space, like we can talk about things, And Yeah, just keeping communication open, scheduling quality time with you and the kids, letting them know. Like, again, they're old enough to just be like, you guys, you know what? I love you so much, but right now I'm gonna go take a hot bath, you know, or I've got to go to a yoga class or whatever. Like, I need to start making time for me and encouraging them. Like, it's totally okay for you guys to like make time for you. So we're all going through stress. We're all going, you know, and if they're talking to you and they're like, you know what, I'm really upset that dad's not around and whatever, to validate them and be like, you know what, I'm really sorry too. I'm really sorry too. And I wish things were different, and not talking bad about him, you know, but just validating them, because that's the other thing, right? So, because for kids, their parents are half of who they are. So even if they have an absolutely rotten parent, they can still, understandably so, they get defensive and they can get upset, because it's like, it's in a weird kind of way, it's talking bad about them. So, you know, it's kind of trying to walk that line where, you know, they can, if they want to talk bad about their dad, that you're, you know, you're listening and you're like, I'm sorry, you're going through this, I'm sorry, yes, that is incredibly hurtful that he's doing that, and you're listening and you're validating, but you're not jumping in and like, you know, going on the attack. So that would be my 2 cents with that, and I hope things go better over time. And if things with your ex, you know, and my guess is he's probably really hurt too in all of this, and especially if he is incredibly narcissistic, because he's lost a lot of power and control over everybody. And if he's, you know, more, again, like, I don't know the dynamic, I don't know how severe his behavior is. If it's not manipulative, if it's just him being hurt and him being negative, and if you feel like this could be something that you could discuss and talk to him and just say, you know what, like, and again, like, everybody's situation is different, but if, like I said, if it's not putting the kid, if it's not dangerous and destructive, right, or abusive, for sure, but saying, hey, you know what, you are important to the kids, and even though we divorced and we split, you know, you still play a really important role in their lives, and just letting him know that. And again, of course, this is the book of the night. I keep Divorce Poison. Fantastic, fantastic book. Highly recommend it, especially if you are a counselor. I think it's just one of those books. Boy, I would highly, anybody that's working with people that are divorced, so like attorneys, judges, social workers, you know, therapists, my goodness, fantastic book. Highly recommend it. So, okay, here's another one. This is from Jen. Jen says, Dear Dana, this is kind of long. Dear Dana, I left my abusive narcopath almost 2 years ago. It has been a huge struggle, but I feel like I'm finally getting to a good place where I don't completely crumble when having any kind of contact with him. From almost the beginning, I have made sure all communication was through text or email. We have 4 children, so going no contact is literally impossible, not to mention the fact that he parent stalks me, as my attorney calls it. Anytime it is my parenting time with our children, he is always helicoptering over us and constantly calling and texting my older 2. When I got our parenting plan court-ordered a year and a half ago, the judge ordered that we also attend co-parenting counseling together. As you can probably imagine, attending counseling with a narcopath is pure torture, especially when they are out to get you for leaving them. In the last year and a half, he has filed for full custody of our 4 children using nothing but lies and partial truths spun to fit his story of me being crazy and an unfit mother. Our first co-parenting session was before Thanksgiving. He told our therapist that I cheated on him, which was not true, that I beat him and the kids, also not even close to true. Of course, he spends a good portion of any mediation or therapy session raving about how wonderful he is because he has lost 100 pounds. Oh, after I left him, which in his mind inherently means I'm an awful person and a mother, and a terrible mother. WTF. Of course, he never mentions that he did nothing but take 3 to 4 hour naps every day, never helped with housework, yard work, or the children, unless it made him look good to other people. And even then, I did all the work behind the scenes. His own family called me a single mom because I did everything. He drank 12 to 15 beers every night and would lock me out of our bedroom for the night if his dinner wasn't on the table at the exact time he was done drinking, which was some random time between 10 or 11 p.m., and was the second dinner of the night that I made. Do I bring any of this stuff up in the session? It seems like the point of the sessions are how to work together for the children's sake, not rehash old issues. But you can't effectively co-parent with a narcissist. You have to do damage control and counter-parent. Yes, you do. Good that you see that. I need help on how to get through these sessions without coming out feeling like I got run over by a semi-truck filled to the brim with lies. How can I make the therapist clear on what he really is without giving him tidbits to turn around and then project on me? If I say he's gaslighting, he will say that's what I'm doing. If I say he's blame shifting, he will say that's what I'm doing. If I say he's a liar, he will say he has proof that I'm lying, which he never does. He just says that everybody sees how awful I am and tells him. And poor him has to hear it from everybody when he's not soliciting for the info. Ugh, give me a break. I roll. Thank you for all your wonderful videos and live streams. They've been so very helpful and comforting. Jen. Okay, so a couple things here. I would recommend talking to the therapist outside of the session, either calling her or him on the phone ahead of time or before, like where you've got a good 10 minutes or so to talk to them and letting them know, this person, I've gone through emotional, verbal abuse, I've gone through cheating, I've gone through lying, I've gone through deceiving, I've gone through hell with this man. He's incredibly abusive, and I'm done. This therapy, I realize this is the kind of person that I'm dealing with, and he's incredibly narcissistic. So I think a lot of therapists don't, words like narcissist or sociopath or narcopath, I think can be thrown around a lot. And my guess would be, especially if you've got a therapist that's, assigned to do couples counseling through the court, they probably hear a lot of name calling all the time. So that might not necessarily mean much to them. But I would encourage you to talk about the behaviors instead of the labels, so they can get a fuller picture of what you mean, and saying, I really feel like he is continuing to abuse me during therapy. He's continuing to abuse me outside of therapy. It's the gaslighting, it's the projection, it's the denial, it's the blame, it's all of it. And I went through this with my marriage, and I'm done, and I'm not doing this anymore. So we can do these couples sessions. The goal is to focus on the children. Can you please, if he starts in on us, we're divorced. Our relationship doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter what he thinks about me. To keep it on topic, because it just gives him free reign to continue to abuse me. So, and hopefully the therapist, once they kind of get a heads up about like what's going on, that they can approach the session differently. So I would say focus on the kids. If the therapist doesn't kind of head this off at the pass, you are totally within the realm of being reasonable and responsible to say, you know what, let's focus on the kids. We're done. Like, we're divorced. So you can think whatever you want to think of me. I'm here for the kids. Let's focus on the kids. And you can steer the conversation back to the kids, back to the kids, back to the kids. Also, knowing, like you said, this is all about damage control and counter parenting. So this is the kind of stuff that you are up against. Knowing what you're walking into, it would be a mistake to have open, honest, sincere communication with a person who's looking to take all of that. It would be a mistake to show them the hand that you're playing, right? So you have to really go about this of carefully. It's a tightrope, unfortunately. And for him, it's about power and control, and it's about winning. It's not about what's doing in the best interest of like the kids or you or anything. So I think having reasonable expectations for where this is going to go, which is probably nowhere. And then I think once you can readjust your expectations and realize this guy is going to continue to be like this is what he does. This is how he's been the whole time we were married. You know, he's a liar. He's delusional. He projects. He's got his own understanding of history, of all of this. He's going to continue having that. He's going to continue having this real skewed version of reality. So, you know, hopefully if you can keep the session focused on the kids, keep it focused on parenting, keep it realizing that he's probably not going to change, and trying to just dance this dance that the judge wants you to dance, and do the best that you can, kind of given these parameters. Hopefully that'll make you feel less like you're getting hit by a semi-truck full of bricks. Because that's a terrible way to feel after this every single time. Another thing to do would be like, okay, realizing, yeah, this is how I feel at the end of these sessions. What can you do to kind of decompress after these sessions? You know, is it calling a friend? Is it taking a hot bath? Is it going for a walk? What can you do to kind of ground yourself and not let this man continue to just take energy from you? So kind of getting a game plan together of, okay, we've got therapy on, I don't know, Tuesday nights, and this is how I normally feel afterwards. What would make you feel better going into it? And then that way you have that thing to look forward to after you get out of there. So it's not just, you know, a hit and run. And then again, that book, Divorce Poison, fantastic book. Which I will link that book down in the description area below. Okay, Tiffany says, Dana, I watched your videos this morning and I am at such a place of needed advice or sanity. I feel like I am completely out of my mind and so alone. My marriage ended 1.5 years ago. I cannot move on from him. I am always calling him and he never calls me. He blocks my number and will only answer when he feels like it. I found women's underwear in his laundry when he asked me to fold them. I was told it was a community washer and dryer, and what the hell did I expect? I sat there knowing that he was lying because I was folding the sheets to his bed and the underwear was in there. I found condoms he bought, though we never used them. He said he bought them just because. My doctor put me in a mental hospital in May for 10 days. I called him there nonstop and told him to stop seeing her, and he said he would not. When I came out, I was on Prozac. I was fine, but then I called him after 2 weeks, and I am an effing wreck again. I can't even be on Facebook because he says all of this nonsense about me. I am not getting any medicine anymore because it just doesn't work. I am constantly crying, and I feel like my work is going to let me go. I'm a paralegal. I've been there for 7 years. I used to be so happy and smile. All I can do is cry, and I never sleep. He has ripped me up in all aspects of myself to the point I ask him, do you even like anything about me? He never has time for me when I text him. He texts sometimes or doesn't, but then calls to scream at me for telling me to stop acting crazy and just be happy. How can I be happy when I feel like this, or I know something is just not right? He has seen my mental state is clearly not right anymore because I am so heartbroken and I never know where I stand. I feel like he wants me to kill myself. He tells me I have a dark soul and I'm messed up, but my heart is too good. I know this. Please help me. I feel like I don't know what to do. I seriously feel crazy. So, you're not crazy. Okay, it sounds like you've been dealing with a lot of gaslighting and a lot of lying and a lot of deceiving. And this feeling of confusion, when we feel confused with stuff like this, when we're like, okay, I see underwear, I see condoms, all of the smoke is here, right? But then you're being lied to and saying that there is no fire. Like, you're crazy. There's no fire. There's no smoke. There's no smoke. Like, you're just imagining all of it. That is psychological abuse. That's gaslighting, and it erodes a person's sanity, like exactly what you're describing and experiencing. Where that feeling of you said, I feel like I don't know what to do. We do know what to do. It's that we wish we didn't. And that's where that feeling of confusion and feeling crazy comes from, is because we want the truth to be something other than it is. You want deep down, it sounds like deep down inside, to believe. You want to believe him. You want to believe that he's being faithful, that you are a priority, that things could work out, that, he could, that it is just you, right? Like, we want to hold on to the fantasy, and you're not alone in that. There's lots of, I think everybody that's out there that's been in a relationship with a narcissistic person has held on to that fantasy, that held on to that hope that things could be different, that they're not really seeing what they're seeing. They're not really experiencing what they're experiencing, that it can change. And it's hard to actually leave a situation like this, but kind of bottom line is, it's not good if we're with somebody that's bad for our mental health. Like, if you're feeling to the point where, like, I feel like I'm trying to be driven to suicide, I feel like I'm crazy, I'm so profoundly unhappy, I can't function. This is not a good situation. And I would strongly encourage you to consider going to get into a support group, first off, if you haven't already. So my info for my support groups, you can find all of that at my website, thriveafterabuse.com. Getting into a good support group, finding people that do validate you, that do support you, that do understand, and working towards getting yourself to a place that you're safe and sane, which is most likely going to be far away from this man. Because that's the thing with crumbs. Like, there's a saying out there, when we're getting crumbs of attention, crumbs of affection, crumbs of truth, crumbs don't keep a person fed. Crumbs keep a person starving. And until we realize that, if we've been settling for crumbs for so long, it can be hard to realize that we're starving. And I think you're at that place where you're like, I'm starving. I can't do this anymore. I can't. And, it's the thing, like, if you find yourself at the end of the rope, sometimes you just got to let the rope down. You just got to put it down and be like, I can't do this anymore. I can't do this anymore. It's not healthy. It's not good. I have nothing left to give. So, coda groups can also be fantastic with kind of rediscovering yourself, talking about dealing with, this one-sided dynamics like this, with boundaries, with finding yourself again. But I would encourage you, get into a good support group. If you can, if therapy is an option, to get into, ideally find some good therapy that you can work on. I'm so sorry that you're going through this, and I feel your pain in this. But please don't let him drive you to suicide, and please realize that this, I know it's scary. I know change is always so scary. It is, but you're not alone in this, and life does go on, and many of your best days are still ahead of you, and you have been in such a dark place for so long that this level of insanity has been your normal. But there's there's, oh, once you get out of this and you start building up a life that you love, you're not living under this oppression. You're not living under this feeling like an afterthought. It shouldn't be like this. So I'm sorry that you're going through this. So, okay, let me see if there's... Okay, this one's from Grace. Grace asks, would a narcissist commit suicide to protect his ego or image? My belated husband committed suicide after being caught molesting my then 13-year-old daughter. He often would mysteriously say that I would one day not regret being... I thought he meant he'd go sleep with a hooker or have an affair, never that he would turn to my daughter. He was a deacon in a church, a fraud investigator, a police reservist, and an army reservist. No one would ever believe me if I told them of the physical, mental, and emotional abuse at home. He'd hold my head under water. He threatened me with a hot iron. He burst my eardrums. He pulled me about the house by my hair. He locked me in a room. He belittled me in home and in public. He ridiculed me for not finishing school. The list could go on forever. We were together for 24 long years. My children and I were left with hardly anything, including self-esteem and credibility. He left this world leaving letters filled with lies about us. 10 years on, I sometimes hover on the ridge of doubt that he was a narcissist. Was he? I still relive some of the abuse. My children are battling with relationships and so on. Your opinion, please. It feels like he is still controlling me from his grave. Hands down, this man was incredibly narcissistic and incredibly disturbed. And again, if you think about that scale that I was talking about earlier, everybody's on it. It's a matter of where they're on it, right? So he's on this far end of the scale of this self-orientation where it's him first. Him to the point where he took his own life. But, he decided that he felt justified and entitled to molest your daughter. That's beyond disgusting and outrageous. So that's way like extreme, highly problematic in terms of the spectrum. He's very of like narcissistic. Which I would think like that's pretty much, like diagnosable. Like that's really, really extreme stuff. But again, like to me, that's splitting hair. If a person is incredibly narcissistic, it sounds like he committed suicide shortly after being found out that he'd been molesting your daughter. Yes, that is probably what happened. He got caught. He didn't want to face consequences. It would have been his public image and his social status for doing something like that. And that's, not uncommon for them to do something, for them to commit suicide over that when there's the gig is up. But again, I hope that you're not internalizing any of this and thinking that this has something to do with you or your daughter or any of this. Like this is a very sick, twisted man that, you got tangled up with, and there is no fixing this. Like this is deep-rooted stuff within him. So, and as far as him controlling you from beyond the grave, I sincerely hope that you guys can find some good therapy and, maybe even some good support groups as well to work through this, because just that level of damage is just, the degree of selfishness is just like beyond. It's just beyond. It reminds me something similar. I had a neighbor. This was like 7 years ago or so. Kind of like when I lived out in the mountains. So there wasn't a lot of us out there. And my next door neighbor, this Christmas Eve, And saw them like the next day, and I'd asked him like, hey, how was your Christmas? How are things? And he had said it was awful, that he'd gotten a call from a friend of theirs, who she was in an abusive relationship with this guy, and they had a child, and he of course was blaming her for everything. And Christmas Eve, and I forget how old the child, like young, like 8 or so, he grabbed a gun and went in front of the living room in front of both of them and said, see, look at what you made me do. And he shot himself in the head and killed himself. And the whole intention was, I'm going to try to ruin your life because look at what you made me do. That's what I'm talking about, like that extreme level of that they are willing to just destroy themselves in order to continue hurting people. It's such a malicious, abusive final act when it's that kind of stuff. And I'm just so sorry. Nobody should have to go through this. And it's like I said, I keep saying it's so not you. It is so not you. It's him. And I'm so sorry that you and your kids have to try to deal with the aftermath of something like this. I can only imagine like the mix of emotions and the amount of pain and all of it. So I'm just, oh my gosh, it's a lot. So, okay, last question. This is from Rosa. Rosa asks, do we ever recover? I don't know who I am sometimes, and I've forgotten who I used to be. I'm not with the narcissist, but I am not over it either. I feel so stuck. That's a great question. And oh gosh, I think we can all so relate to feeling like being in limbo like that, and being like, I'm not over them, but I'm not who I used to be, and I don't even know who I used to be, and where do I go, and like what does healing look like, and what does moving forward look like, and like there's just so many unanswered questions. And the thing with healing, the thing with recovering is we don't go back to who we were. We never go back to who we were with anything. Life is always about moving forward, always. And all of these different events in our life, good and bad, have the capacity to shape us as people. And they do shape us as people. So, but the thing is though, we have the capacity to decide how they're going to shape us. And that might sound kind of strange, like, really? Like, do we? Because I'm pretty sure this is pretty traumatic, and I feel like this is not shaping me in a positive way whatsoever. But we can decide, we can make that declaration of, because this event, like any event, it's going to shape you one way or the other. So knowing that, being like, okay, if this is the path we're on, this is going to have some sort of impact in my life because it was incredibly traumatic. Then we're left with, how are we going to let this shape us? We can go with the default, which is, this is going to be a terrible thing and it's going to shape me in a very negative way, and I'm going to become bitter and jaded and angry, which is totally understandable if somebody ends up going down that path. But we do have the alternative to decide, you know what, I am going to use this for my highest and greatest good. Even if you don't know how, even if you don't know what that means, even if you're like, I'm a million miles away from like highest and greatest good. Like, I'm just trying to get out of bed. If I get out of bed and shower, it's a good day, right? That's okay if you're there. But making that declaration, realizing right now, you are the captain of this ship. You have the ability to decide where the ship is going. And this is where sheer determination and digging your heels in comes into play. Where you're like, you know what? Yeah, my life might be blown into a million different pieces, but come hell or high water, I am not going to let this sink me. No, sir. Nope. I'm going to take this event and I'm going to use it for my highest and greatest good. I'm going to squeeze out as much as I possibly can from this. And you do that by, in part, deciding what constitutes a good life for you. You know, what does that look like? And on every level, like big levels, small levels, medium-sized levels, and you start taking action. So all of that energy, all of that anger, all of that hurt, to start channeling it into, trying to transform it into doing positive things that where you can reclaim your power and control and then move forward in that direction. With saying that, okay, there's feeling anger, feeling hurt, feeling like your life is blown into a million pieces. These are all very valid emotions. And so with me saying this I'm not saying this in a way that, like, you know, to avoid those emotions, because they're still going to be there, right? But it helps to kind of burn off that extra energy by pouring it into something positive. So cleaning out your car, cleaning out a junk drawer, organizing your closet, realizing, you know, it's part of it. It's part of, like, bringing that ideal life of yours into focus in little ways every day. Rediscovering who you are. That's a big thing. And I think that's a lot of, I know I've struggled with that big time. I think a lot of people do. A support group can really help with this. CODA groups can really help with this. And, you know, getting clear with yourself and turning inward and trying to figure out kind of, okay, asking yourself some questions. You know, what gives you energy? What takes energy? Getting curious, I guess, is what it is. That's the thing. I think trying to replace, like, judgment or resentment with curiosity. Curiosity about, who am I? Like, who am I? You know, and on every little level. And it might just sound kind of strange, but really, like, getting curious about this, you know, do you like, and you can start with things maybe that you're not so emotionally invested in. Like, do you like Indian food? Do you like Chinese food? Do you like Italian food? I remember, kind of speaking of which, what was it, like, opening, I don't know what I was doing, like opening a new bank account or something, and I had to answer a bunch of those security questions. Like, what is your favorite color? Like, what is your favorite song? What is your, you know, all of these things. And I was so close to, like, having this emotional breakdown because I'm like, I don't know. Like, I at the time, I'm like, I don't know. Do other people know? Like, how do I not know this? And freaking out that I didn't know myself enough to have those kinds of answers. And that was a very eye-opening moment for me. So, you know, like, starting to just get curious. Okay, you know, do you like, you know, what kind of outdoor activities do you like? What kind of hobbies do you like? What kind of hobbies do you think you might like? What kind of music do you like? Oh, and here's kind of a way, another way to go about this is to ask yourself, what don't you like? Because sometimes when we know what we don't like, that'll give us a clue as far as, like, the knowing what we do like. So if you're like, you know what, I really don't like Mexican food because it's spicy. Well, then that kind of clues you in that maybe you would like, I don't know, you know, casseroles or something that's not spicy, right? Or if that you really like, you know, like, I really don't like horror movies because I find them very upsetting. I really don't like really anything upsetting, like news or, you know, crime TV kind of stuff. That just, I have a hard time shaking that off. So I know that, okay, that's I know that I don't like that, but what do I like? Well, I like things that are really like heartwarming and affirming about like the goodness of people and the goodness of humanity. Um, you know, again, like asking your, just kind of just exploring it and realizing this is, it's upsetting, and I get it, to not have a solid sense of yourself. It can be downright terrifying, but it's also, it can be very exciting because it's like you're a caterpillar turning into a butterfly, and you're just at this different chapter, this different stage in your life where you're transforming. And you get to consciously pick up the pieces of your broken life and decide what stays and what goes and what you're going to rebuild with. And the cool thing is, once you start rebuilding with pieces that you've made very conscious decisions about, you're like, you know what? This piece right here is, 100% me. Like, I'm really jazzed about this. When you start really rebuilding a life that you love, that's made out of all of these pieces that you've intentionally thought about, then that's, man, talk about living an authentic life and having this degree of like, you just really know who you are. I don't think a lot of people really know who they are, frankly. But you can get to that place where you really have a good sense of who you are when you're going about piecing your life together at a very conscious level like that. So another quick tip I'll give you real quick. I should do an article, a blog post about this, is what I call the 9 or 10. So paying attention to how things feel around you. Food, music, lighting, clothes, all of your senses, touch, taste, feel, sight, smell. I think I got them all. All of your different senses. How do certain fabrics feel? Like, do you and rank it on a scale of like 0 to 10. So 10 being, oh my gosh, that is the most amazing thing ever, to 5 being like, meh, to 0 being like, ugh, like ice cold. And then going around and asking yourself, again, getting curious, asking yourself, how do I feel about certain things? Like this, well, like my Buddha board, like this thing. I like this a lot. I didn't realize I would have this for as long as I've had this. But this is like a 10 for me. This was really my focus point of who I wanted to be, and the direction that I wanted to steer when I was putting my life back together. And that just has a lot of sentimental attachment to me. This is my little dove, right? So this I love this thing. This is like a 9 or a 10 for me. I don't know how this made its way into my house. This is a ballpoint pen. I do not like ballpoint pens. This is like the equivalent of like nails on a chalkboard for me. I don't know what it is. It stresses me out. It makes me really uncomfortable. I don't like writing with ballpoint pens. I know how diva that sounds, but it's the truth. So be it. I, however, love like ink, like gel point pens. So I just love writing with them. I have them all. I got a whole, look at this. I have a whole jar, like full of them of all different colors. Like I really enjoy writing with them. That to me is like a 9 or a 10. I like Michigan. I live in Michigan. Michigan for me is a 10. I absolutely love it here. Arizona, the Southwest, absolutely beautiful. But for me, it's like a 5. It's beautiful. It's not my place. It's too dry. There's not water is where it's at for me. So again, do you see what I'm saying? So like kind of asking yourself, okay, what are these different elements that really make me feel alive? What are these 9 or 10 kind of experiences or things in my life? And then kind of transferring that concept to, to different like friendships or to people. Just how are you feeling around people? And I know it might feel like really judgmental at first, and I don't mean it to be. It's just a way of you to tune into what gives you energy and what takes energy. And once you start kind of getting a good grip on that, that really is what it boils down to, frankly. If it's giving you energy, it's nourishing you. Do more of that. If it's taking energy, if it's sucking life from you, do less of that. And you'll know that you're on track based on how you feel. When you're in alignment with who you are and what you're about, generally it's when we're having what most people call like flow, like we're in flow, or we're having these peak experiences, or we're feeling alive. We feel juiced. We feel excited, right? Those are those kinds of feelings. Those are those 9 or 10 on the scale. Those peak experiences. Move in that direction. And again, like I said, it can be as small as, a $2 pin. I really get a lot of enjoyment out of that. And there's big experiences, there's little ones. I mean, it's knowing yourself. And so everybody's 9 or a 10 is different. It's knowing yourself well enough to be like, yeah, you know what? That's a thing for me. Like this is what I just really, really enjoy. And once you tune in enough to be like, you know what, I just really, that's it. Like, that's it for me. I just really get a lot of enjoyment out of that. Other people's opinions don't matter. Like it totally does not matter to me if other people are like, well, I don't know, ink pens are really messy and I don't like them. And I'm like, well, okay, you don't have to like them. I love them. And I'm going to keep using them because I like them. And I'm not hurting anybody by using them. So I'm going to keep doing that. So the less validation we need when we become more kind of reassured with who we are and what we're about and what's important to us. So I hope that helps. I'll be curious to see kind of what you find when you start exploring. My guess is you're going to probably, much like me, probably much like a lot of people, you're going to start finding like, oh my gosh, how did I not know these things about myself? Like, how did I not know what my favorite song was at the moment? Or like that I don't like button-down shirts. Like, why do I own button-down shirts? Like, you're going to start having these realizations about yourself. And that's just, it's all part of self-awareness, and it's all part of it like coming into focus and coming into our awareness. It's just weird. It's weird when it happens because it's like I live with myself. Like, how do I not know these things? But interesting stuff. So I hope that helps. Let's see. I'm going to call it a night because it is getting late. And so you guys, thank you so much for joining me. And if you're new here, oh, that's a good question. Real quick, I'm going to throw that in there. Elise says, asks the question, what do you like that makes you you? I love that. Great question. Yeah. I've heard some things phrased in a similar way that I think is, that I thought was really cute. People say, what is your superpower? I like that. Like, what is like the one thing, and I think everybody has it. We might not realize we have it, but everybody has it. What is like the one thing that you're really good at? Maybe it's you are a really good listener, or a really good gift giver, or a really good cook, or I was talking to one of my patients the other day, and he had said, we were talking about Thanksgiving, and he had said, he's like, his one thing he was really good at in life is making mashed potatoes. And he's like, man, he's like, I just own it. He's like, I have all these different recipes, and he just is, he's like, that is my superpower. Like, that is my thing. Amazing mashed potatoes. So everybody's got a thing, like big or small, everybody's got it. That is not to make light of mashed potatoes, because that truly is a delicious superpower. So, you know, it's good to kind of think about like what makes you uniquely you, and what do you like about you, and here's another spin on that question, is what would other people say that they like about you, that your best quality would be. I think that can be interesting too, to kind of get some perspective about that. And of course, other people whose opinions that you would value, right? Not an abusive person who's trying to grind you down. So, yeah, Phil says he lived in Holland, Michigan for a year when he was a teenager. Yeah, it's beautiful out there. So, okay, guys, yes, we're going to call it a night. And thank you, everybody, so much for joining. And thank you so much for supporting each other in the chat, and for all of the input and amazing questions and advice, and just compassion and understanding, and being there for each other is just awesome, and it's heartwarming, and I just love it so much. I can't even begin to tell you. Like, it just makes my heart smile to see all of these people coming together on the internet in a way that's positive, and it's just really cool. So thank you guys so much, and we'll hopefully see you again next week, every Wednesday night, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we'll go from there. If you have a question that you want for sure for me to see, you can email me at deardana@thriveafterabuse.com. Okay? So you guys have a fantastic rest of your week. We'll see you soon. Take care. As always, lots of love to you guys. You are not alone. You are not crazy. And you really can move forward and heal from this. So take care and have an amazing week. Okay? Bye.